You've been told that freedom comes from control, from having the perfect plan, the perfect answers, the perfect life. But if that were true, why do you still feel so heavy inside? Why do you lie awake at night, holding on to the past, worrying about the future, trying to force life to bend to your will? The truth is, freedom doesn't come from gripping harder, it comes from letting go. For thousands of years, Buddhist wisdom has shared the same secret. Life opens when you release. Happiness doesn't come from owning or controlling. It comes from trusting the universe. The great teachers discovered that when you stop fighting the current, you're carried by it. Instead of struggle, there's flow. Instead of fear, there's trust. Instead of exhaustion, there's a deep exhale you didn't know you were holding. And tonight, as you listen, something inside you will begin to shift. The weight you've carried will loosen. The noise in your mind will grow quiet. You'll feel what it means to stop forcing and start trusting, to finally let life unfold the way it was always meant to. Tomorrow, you'll wake up lighter, calmer, and more open, ready to walk hand in hand with the universe instead of against it. This isn't just another sleep meditation. This is the beginning of letting go. This is the art of trusting the universe. Are you ready? Let's begin. You have been told since childhood that things belong to you. Your toys, your clothes, your friends, your successes. You learned to say, "This is mine," before you even understood what those words meant. But underneath this habit of ownership, there is a quiet truth that most people never face. Nothing has ever truly been yours. Every single thing you call mine is only passing through your hands for a brief time. The house you live in was once someone else's, and one day it will be lived in by strangers. The body you walk around in came from your parents and will one day dissolve back into the earth. Even the breath you are taking right now is borrowed from the air around you, entering and leaving without asking your permission. What then is really yours? This question unsettles the mind because it strikes at the core of how we live. We are taught to hold, to guard, to protect. Yet the more tightly we cling, the more fragile everything feels. Anxiety arises not only from the possibility of losing what we own, but from the deep recognition that we cannot truly keep it, no matter how hard we try. Think of the objects in your home. Each one required effort, time, money to acquire. Some you bought with excitement, some you received as gifts, some you worked years to afford. For a short while they satisfied you, gave a rush of happiness, made you feel more complete. But how quickly that feeling faded. The phone that thrilled you became outdated. The shoes you loved began to wear. The furniture that once impressed you now feels ordinary. And still you go out searching for the next thing, the next purchase, the next upgrade. This cycle is endless because the object was never the source of fulfillment. What we chase is a feeling, and feelings cannot be owned. They arise, they peak, they fade. To tie your happiness to an object is to tie yourself to the wheel of craving and disappointment. You don't just own the thing, it begins to own you. It asks for your care, your money, your maintenance, your attention. It takes more than it ever gave. But attachment doesn't end with material things. It reaches into relationships too. How easily the language of ownership slips into love. We speak of my partner, my child, my friend, as if a human being, alive and free, could ever belong to another. What pain this illusion creates. Parents suffer when their children make choices different from their own hopes. Lovers ache when their partners drift away. Friends grow resentful when bonds shift or fade. The hurt is sharper because of the unspoken belief. You were mine, and now I have lost you. Yet no one has ever belonged to you. A person is not an object to keep. They are a life, just like you, moving through experiences, changing with time. To love while clinging is to turn affection into chains. You may call it care, but deep down it is fear. fear of losing what was never yours to begin with. When this truth is seen clearly, love transforms. It stops grasping and begins to flow freely, without demand, without ownership. That is when it becomes real. Achievements, too, are subject to this illusion. The title you hold at work, the recognition you gained, the trophies on your shelf, how permanent do they feel? For a short time, they feed the ego. You feel proud, important, seen. But the applause fades. Someone else earns the title. The memory of your victory becomes old news. If your sense of worth rests on these fragile markers, you will spend your life running after the next achievement, terrified of being forgotten. Clinging to identity may be the most exhausting ownership of all. Think about the image you protect, the kind of person you want the world to see. Maybe it is being strong, successful, beautiful, intelligent, spiritual. Every day you put on the mask, polish it, defend it, terrified that it might crack. But the self you cling to is not solid. It changes with age, with mood, with circumstance. The person you were 10 years ago is gone. The person you will be in 10 years is still unknown. Yet how much energy is wasted trying to preserve a version of yourself that cannot last? The Buddha's teaching of non-attachment is not a call to abandon life, but to see it clearly, to see that all things arise and pass, to see that nothing is owned, only experienced. Ownership is an illusion because everything is in motion. Objects decay, people change, moments slip away. Clinging turns this natural flow into suffering, like trying to stop the river with your hands. The freedom begins when you let the river move as it will, and learn to move with it. Letting go of ownership changes how you relate to possessions. Instead of holding them with fear, you begin to use them with gratitude. You appreciate what is here now, knowing it is a guest, not a possession. When it breaks or leaves, you are not destroyed, because you never saw it as yours to begin with. This shift lightens the heart and opens space for joy. It also changes how you relate to people. When you stop believing in ownership, relationships are freed from pressure. You no longer demand that someone stay the same or fulfill your script. You love them as they are, knowing they are free to grow, free to leave, free to be. And because of that freedom, the bond becomes more real. There is no suffocation, only presence. Even with yourself, the illusion of ownership begins to fade. You stop clinging to a fixed identity and allow yourself to change. You realize you are not your achievements, not your failures, not even your thoughts. You are the awareness that witnesses them all. And awareness does not need ownership, it only needs openness. Modern life makes this lesson difficult. Consumer culture tells you that happiness lies in the next purchase, the next upgrade, the next possession. Social media urges you to cling to an image, to gather followers and approval, to prove yourself through numbers. The world whispers, more, 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 and punishes you for letting go. But the ancient wisdom still stands. Clinging only creates chains, and the chains were never real. Notice how children live. They play with a toy intensely for a moment, then drop it without regret when something else captures their attention. They laugh, they cry, they move on. There is no clinging, no illusion of forever. Adults call it childish, but maybe it is closer to truth. Notice also the peace of elders who have accepted impermanence. They know their possessions will pass on, their loved ones too. Instead of resisting, they begin to savor. Each conversation, each morning, each small joy becomes precious because it is fleeting. This is not despair, it is wisdom. The letting go of ownership is not about neglect. You still care for your home, your loved ones, your work, but you care without fear, without chains. You care because you can, not because you must hold on forever. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to own, you finally start to enjoy. There is a story in the Buddhist tradition of a monk who carried a precious cup. He treated it with care but also with ease, saying, "This cup is already broken." To others, it sounded strange, but to him, it was wisdom. He knew the cup would one day shatter, so he lived with it fully while it lasted, without fear of loss. When it eventually broke, he did not suffer, because he had never seen it as permanent or his. This is the heart of freedom. Your suffering begins when you cling to what cannot be held. Your freedom begins when you see through the illusion. Objects, people, achievements, even your own body, all are guests. They come, they go. None are truly yours. And that is not a loss, it is a gift. For when nothing is yours, everything can be appreciated. When nothing is permanent, every moment becomes precious. So the question is not, what belongs to me? The real question is, how can I live fully with what is here now, knowing it will one day pass? The answer lies not in grasping, but in releasing, not in fear, but in trust. And once you taste this release, a new kind of life opens, a life not chained by possessions or haunted by loss. A life where relationships are free, where achievements are enjoyed but not clung to, where identity is fluid, and every breath is a gift passing through. That is the beginning of real freedom. When you finally see that nothing can truly be owned, something shifts inside you. The weight of protecting, defending, and clinging begins to fall away. But another subtle chain remains, one just as heavy and often invisible. It is the chain of control. Even if we stop clutching at things, we still grasp at outcomes. We try to bend life to our will, to manage every detail, to force events to align with our desires. And when they don't, we suffer. Control is an addiction dressed as responsibility. It gives us the illusion of safety, the false belief that if we arrange every piece just right, life will finally behave. But the more we tighten our grip, the more restless we become, because the truth is that life has never belonged to our plans. Control does not stop storms from coming, nor does it prevent people from changing, nor does it guarantee success. What it guarantees is tension, mental knots, anxious nights, and a constant war against reality. Think of the countless hours spent planning conversations, replaying what should have been said, rehearsing outcomes that never arrived. Think of the energy spent predicting the future, building scenarios in the mind, preparing for every possibility, only for life to unfold in ways you could never have scripted. This is the karma of control. The more you attempt to micromanage existence, the more dissatisfaction grows. The word karma is often misunderstood. Many see it as punishment or reward, but at its heart, karma is simply the law of cause and effect. Every thought, word, and action plants a seed. Clinging to control is its own seed, and the fruit it bears is stress, fear, and endless disappointment. When you insist on bending reality to your liking, you push against the current of life itself. And just like trying to swim upstream forever, you exhaust yourself until there is nothing left. What makes this cycle so difficult is that control feels reasonable. Who doesn't want security? Who doesn't want things to go well? Yet what we call security is often a cage. In the effort to manage every risk, spontaneity dies. In the attempt to force perfection, joy is strangled. A day planned down to the smallest detail leaves no space for surprise, no room for the unexpected beauty that arrives when you let things be. At its root, control is born from fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of uncertainty. The mind believes that if it can just cover every angle, anticipate every twist, then pain will be avoided. But fear does not disappear with more control, it grows stronger. You feed it every time you obey its command to tighten your grip. The paradox is clear. The more you try to control, the less control you actually have, because fear is driving you, not freedom. Look closely at the relationships in your life. How many have been damaged, not by malice, but by control? a parent who cannot accept their child's choices, a partner who suffocates the other with demands, a friend who insists on things going their way. The desire to control may come from love or concern, but it corrodes connection. No one thrives under a leash. What begins as care turns into domination, and the bond weakens under the weight of expectation. Even in solitude, control keeps us chained. We monitor our own behavior with merciless eyes, criticize every mistake, punish ourselves for not being perfect. The inner controller is always watching, always judging, never satisfied. It whispers that you are not doing enough, not achieving enough, not good enough. This voice drives you harder, but peace never arrives, because peace cannot exist where there is constant supervision. The teachings of Buddhism reveal that the obsession with control is another form of ignorance, ignorance of interdependence. Every event in life is born from countless causes and conditions. A flower does not bloom because one person demanded it. It blooms because of the soil, the rain, the sunlight, the passing of time. To believe you are the sole author of outcomes is to ignore the vast web of forces at play. You are a thread in the fabric, not the whole tapestry. When you understand interdependence, humility grows. You see that your choices matter, but they are never the only cause. You contribute, but you do not command. This recognition softens the need to micromanage. You still act with wisdom, but you let go of the fantasy that you can dictate results. Effort remains, but it is no longer poisoned by desperation. There is also a karmic truth hidden here. When you push life too hard, life pushes back. The one who cannot rest ends up burned out. The one who manipulates others loses trust. The one who fears uncertainty closes the door on opportunity. Control breeds the very suffering it tries to prevent. The harder you resist uncertainty, the more it dominates your life. Releasing control does not mean passivity. It means participation without obsession. It means doing what you can, but not attaching your worth to the outcome. It means trusting that life has a rhythm you cannot always hear, and that this rhythm carries you even when your plans fall apart. This trust is not naive. It is wisdom born from seeing reality as it is. Think of the times when you let go, when you stopped forcing, when you surrendered. Often, those moments brought unexpected blessings. The conversation you dreaded but approached with openness turned into understanding. The opportunity you thought you lost cleared space for something better. The failure you tried so hard to avoid became the teacher you most needed. These moments are not accidents. They are the fruit of letting go of control. The irony is that true strength appears only when you stop gripping so hard. A tree bends with the wind and survives the storm, while the rigid branch snaps. A river flows around obstacles and finds its way, while stagnant water becomes toxic. Flexibility, openness, trust, these are not weaknesses but the deepest resilience. The universe itself moves through cycles of creation and destruction, birth and death, gain and loss. To align with this flow is wisdom. To resist it endlessly is suffering. So much of human history is the story of control. Empires rose trying to dominate the earth, only to crumble into dust. Leaders demanded loyalty, only to be betrayed. Societies built rigid systems to keep order, only to be shaken by change. Every attempt to freeze life ends in collapse, because life cannot be frozen. It is motion itself. At the personal level, the same truth applies. You can schedule your days, but not your destiny. You can prepare for tomorrow, but tomorrow may bring storms or blessings you never foresaw. You can love deeply, but you cannot stop people from leaving when their path calls them elsewhere. To deny this is to fight a war you cannot win. To accept it is to discover a peace that control will never give. There is an old saying, "Let go or be dragged." The more you resist the natural unfolding, the more painful the ride becomes. Life will move regardless of your plans. The choice is whether you flow with it or exhaust yourself against it. The path forward is not about abandoning responsibility. It is about loosening the grip. Set your intentions, make your efforts, and then release the outcome. Trust that your seeds will grow in their own time, in their own way, shaped by conditions beyond your sight. This is not laziness, it is alignment. It is wisdom that honors both effort and surrender. When you step back from control, new qualities arise. Patience grows, because you no longer demand instant results. Gratitude deepens, because you appreciate what arrives rather than resenting what doesn't. Compassion expands, because you stop forcing people to fit your mold and begin to honor their freedom. And inner calm blossoms, because you are no longer at war with reality. This calm is the true fruit of releasing control. It is the clarity that arises when the mind is no longer tangled in 1,000 strategies. It is the lightness that comes when you stop dragging the heavy chains of should and must. It is the freedom to live this moment fully without trying to bend it into another shape. Every breath is a teacher of this lesson. The inhale is effort, the exhale is release. You cannot hold either forever. If you cling too long to the inhale, your body aches. If you resist the exhale, you suffocate. Life is the same, a rhythm of effort and surrender, a dance between what you give and what you let go. To interrupt this rhythm with endless control is to cut yourself off from life itself. So the invitation is simple, though not always easy. Loosen your grip. Let the universe breathe through you. Trust that not every detail needs your supervision. Learn the difference between wise action and anxious control. One moves with life, the other fights against it. One brings clarity, the other breeds chaos. The karma of control is a wheel that spins endlessly until you step off. The moment you release, the wheel slows. The chains of dissatisfaction loosen. And in their place, a deeper flow begins. A flow where you are no longer the manager of existence, but a participant in its vast unfolding. This is where real freedom begins, not in commanding the universe, but in trusting it. When the weight of control begins to loosen, when you stop exhausting yourself by forcing life into rigid shapes, you discover a new space inside a quieter space where acceptance can grow. But this freedom will always remain fragile if you do not face the one truth most people spend their lives running from. We can let go of possessions. We can soften our grip on relationships. We can even surrender our obsession with control. Yet there is one final attachment that clings deeper than all the rest: the fear of death. Nothing reveals the illusion of ownership and control more sharply than mortality. You may hold on to your body, but one day it will return to the earth. You may hold on to your loved ones, but they too will pass beyond your arms. You may hold on to your achievements, your status, your identity, but death dissolves them all in silence. To resist this truth is to live in denial. To contemplate it deeply is to unlock a doorway into trust that cannot be shaken. The subject of death is uncomfortable because it confronts us with impermanence. The mind wants certainty, wants guarantees that tomorrow will be given, that the people we love will always be near, that our lives will stretch far into the future. But every breath we take is a reminder that life is temporary. Death does not come only at the end of a long life. It can come suddenly, without warning, without reason. To forget this truth makes us reckless with time, blind to what matters. To remember it, however, changes everything. Think of how the knowledge of impermanence sharpens appreciation. When you know a flower will wither, you see its beauty more vividly. When you know a sunset will fade, you watch the colors with deeper attention. When you know a conversation with someone may be the last, you listen with your whole heart. Death, in this way, is not an enemy but a teacher. It teaches you not to waste, not to delay, not to cling, but to live this moment fully, because it will never return. In Buddhism, death contemplation is a practice, not a morbid obsession. Monks meditate in graveyards, reflecting on the decay of the body. They repeat phrases such as, "This body too will break apart," to dissolve the illusion of permanence. Far from depressing, these reflections open the heart to freedom. When you no longer hide from death, life itself becomes lighter. Fear lessens, gratitude deepens, compassion grows, because you know every being shares the same fragile fate. The fear of death often hides beneath other fears. Fear of aging, fear of losing relevance, fear of illness, fear of separation, all are rooted in the knowledge that time is moving and nothing can be held. To see this clearly is to pull fear out by its root. When you understand that impermanence is not a mistake, but the very nature of existence, you stop treating change as a threat. You see it instead as a constant invitation to let go, again and again, until surrender becomes natural. Mortality also dissolves pride. The great and the small, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the forgotten, all face the same end. No title, no possession, no wealth can buy permanence. This recognition can soften arrogance and replace it with humility. It reminds you that beneath all the surface differences, we are equal in our fragility. This awareness naturally awakens compassion, because the struggles of others are not separate from your own. To contemplate death is also to question how you are living. If today were your last day, what would matter? Would you care about the arguments you carried, the grudges you fed, the possessions you chased? Or would you care more about forgiveness, presence, love, and the quiet joy of being alive? Death strips away the unnecessary and leaves only the essential. It is a mirror showing you where your attachments drain your energy and where your heart longs for truth. This contemplation can transform the way you meet each moment. Knowing that life is fragile, you stop postponing what matters. You say the words of love you were afraid to speak. You take the step you kept delaying. You savor the simple things that seemed too ordinary to notice. Death becomes a reminder to stop sleepwalking through your days, and instead wake up to the miracle that is already here. It also reshapes how you hold grief. When someone you love dies, the pain is real, but alongside the sorrow is a deeper understanding that nothing was ever truly yours to keep. The gift of their presence was always temporary, just as your own presence will be temporary for others. This perspective does not erase loss, but it eases the bitterness. You begin to see love not as possession, but as participation in a fleeting, beautiful connection. Grief softens into gratitude, and the heart expands with compassion for all who suffer the same pain. Facing death directly can also liberate you from the prison of fear. When you stop running from the thought of mortality, you take away its power to paralyze you. You recognize that fear wastes the life you have now. By contemplating your end, you become more alive. Paradoxically, the acceptance of death makes you fearless in living, because there is nothing left to hide from. Philosophers, mystics, and poets across cultures have echoed this truth. The Stoics urged daily reflection on death as a way to cultivate courage and clarity. The Zen masters remind their students that each breath might be the last, so live it fully. Indigenous traditions treat death as a continuation, a return to the great cycle. Across time and culture, wisdom agrees. To embrace impermanence is to free the spirit. When you allow death to be your teacher, trust in the universe deepens. You no longer demand guarantees or certainties, because you see that life was never designed to give them. Instead, you trust the unfolding, knowing that birth and death, gain and loss, joy and sorrow are all part of the same vast flow. You stop fighting to secure what cannot be secured and start resting in the truth that you are carried by something larger than yourself. Every day becomes precious, not because it will last, but because it won't. Each act of kindness becomes more meaningful, each small joy more radiant, because you know the moment will pass. Death teaches you that life's value is not in its length, but in its depth. The depth comes not from control, not from ownership, but from presence, trust, and surrender. To walk with this awareness is to live lighter. You do not waste your strength clinging to illusions. You do not waste your time postponing what matters. You do not waste your love withholding it out of fear. Instead, you move through the world with openness, knowing that everything is borrowed and everything will return. And because you know this, you live more fully than ever before. Death, then, is not the opposite of life, but the ultimate reminder of its preciousness. It is not darkness to be feared, but a guide to show you how to let go. To accept death is to accept life, not as you want it to be, but as it truly is, fragile, fleeting, and endlessly beautiful in its impermanence. This is the gift waiting when you allow mortality to speak. It is the wisdom that comes when you face the final letting go, and it is the deepest trust. To know that even in endings, the universe is not betraying you but carrying you into the mystery that every being must one day enter. When death is welcomed as a teacher, instead of feared as an enemy, a different kind of clarity begins to arise. The recognition that everything must end, including ourselves, breaks down the stubborn illusions that keep us chained to fear. But what often lingers even after this realization is the habit of resistance. The mind still pushes against life, still argues with what has already happened, still refuses to flow with what is. Mortality shows us the truth of impermanence, but it is through non-resistance that we learn how to live peacefully within it. Resistance is subtle. It is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it hides in small irritations, in frustration when the line moves too slowly, in bitterness when someone doesn't behave as we expect, in the quiet tightening of the chest when things go differently than our plans. It is the constant whisper inside saying, "This should not be happening." That one thought fuels endless suffering because it sets us against reality itself. The wisdom of non-resistance does not mean resignation. It is not passivity nor indifference. To live in acceptance is not to become a doormat or to let injustice thrive. Non-resistance is something far more powerful. It is the radical strength of aligning with reality instead of fighting it. It is the ability to meet life as it unfolds without adding an extra layer of struggle on top of it. When rain falls, resistance says, "It should not rain today, my plans are ruined." Non-resistance says, "It is raining, how can I move with this?" The first approach doubles the suffering. You face the rain and also the war in your mind. The second dissolves the war and leaves only the experience itself. The rain remains, but the bitterness is gone. This is the difference between living in conflict with life and living in peace with it. At the heart of Buddhist wisdom is the understanding that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain comes from life itself. The body ages, relationships shift, losses happen, mistakes occur. Suffering arises when we resist these truths, when we demand that life be other than it is. Non-resistance removes that second arrow. You may still feel pain, but you no longer stab yourself with the story that it should not exist. There is strength in this approach because it takes courage to release the fight. Most of us are conditioned to meet every difficulty with struggle. We are told to resist, to conquer, to dominate. But resistance consumes energy and blinds us to possibilities. Acceptance, on the other hand, clears the mind. It creates the space to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. It allows us to see options that resistance obscures. Consider a person facing illness. Resistance may show up as denial, as anger at the unfairness, as endless frustration with the limitations imposed. Non-resistance does not mean celebrating the illness. It means acknowledging it honestly, allowing it to exist without wasting energy on refusal. From there, strength arises, not the strength of pretending it doesn't hurt, but the strength of working with what is. In that openness, healing paths appear that resistance kept hidden. Non-resistance also transforms relationships. Conflict in human connection often comes not from what happens, but from the refusal to accept it. Someone forgets to call, and instead of addressing it with openness, the mind resists, saying, they should care more, they should behave differently. Resentment grows from the gap between expectation and reality. Non-resistance closes that gap. It meets the moment as it is, without layering demands on top. That doesn't mean tolerating harm. It means acting from clarity instead of from the fog of inner struggle. This principle extends to the inner world as well. Thoughts and emotions arise beyond our control. Resistance tries to push them away. I should not feel anxious. I should not be angry. I should not think these thoughts. But pushing away only makes them louder. Non-resistance welcomes them as passing guests. Anxiety comes, you allow it. Anger comes, you observe it. Without the war of resistance, emotions rise and fall naturally, leaving less of a scar. The paradox is that surrendering to reality brings more power, not less. When you stop wasting energy fighting what already is, you free your strength for wise action. Acceptance is the foundation for change because you cannot transform what you refuse to acknowledge. Non-resistance says, this is here and I will meet it fully. From that meeting, possibilities open. From that meeting, transformation becomes possible. Consider the flow of water. Water does not resist rocks in its path. It moves around them, over them, even wears them down with time. In its softness, water demonstrates a strength far greater than rigid resistance. Non-resistance works the same way. It is not weakness, but a supple power, the kind that endures and adapts. In daily life, practice begins with small things. Accept the traffic without tightening your chest. Accept the delay without spiraling into anger. Accept the noise without building a story of personal injustice. Each act of non-resistance frees the heart a little more. Over time, this habit grows strong enough to meet even life's greatest challenges with steadiness. Non-resistance also deepens trust in the universe. When you accept reality as it is, you begin to see that life unfolds in patterns beyond your comprehension. What once looked like obstacles may reveal themselves as teachers. What once felt like losses may open the door to unexpected gifts. Resistance blinds you to these patterns. Acceptance allows you to see them. It is important to remember that acceptance does not mean liking everything. You do not have to like pain, loss, or injustice, but you can meet them without denial. From that place of honesty, you can act with wisdom. Resistance locks you in bitterness. Acceptance unlocks your ability to respond. There is a subtle freedom that comes with this practice. The world no longer has to dance to your tune for you to be at peace. Situations no longer need to match your script for you to remain steady. You stop being at the mercy of external conditions because your peace is rooted in acceptance, not in control. This is the quiet strength of non-resistance. It places the source of freedom back in your hands. The teaching of non-resistance does not end in stillness. It expands into compassion. When you stop resisting your own pain, you see more clearly the pain of others. You recognize that they, too, are caught in battles with reality, clinging and fighting against what is. This recognition softens judgment and awakens empathy. Non-resistance is not only freedom for yourself, it is also the soil where kindness grows. Even in the face of death, which was the last teacher we reflected upon, non-resistance shines. To resist mortality is to live in fear. To accept it is to live with gratitude. Death cannot be stopped, but it can be met without terror. And meeting it this way is not weakness, it is the most radical strength of all. Every tradition, every philosophy that has touched on wisdom points to this same truth. Peace comes not from controlling life, but from aligning with it. The storms will come, the seasons will change, the body will weaken, loved ones will depart. None of this is under your command. But you can meet it without resistance, with a heart that says yes to what is, even when it hurts. This is the wisdom that releases the extra burden we place on ourselves. Life's natural challenges are already enough to bear. Why add the weight of inner resistance? To drop that weight is to walk lighter, freer, closer to the core of being. Non-resistance, then, is not passive surrender, but the most courageous form of strength. It is the strength to stop fighting what cannot be changed and to pour your energy into what can. It is the strength to see clearly, to act wisely, and to remain unshaken by the endless shifting of conditions. It is the strength of peace itself. When resistance begins to dissolve, when you stop fighting against reality itself, there is a softer strength that enters your life. Yet even as you accept circumstances, even as you learn to stop pushing against the flow of existence, another struggle still hides within. It is quieter, but far more consuming. It is the constant effort to protect an image of yourself, the version you want the world to see, the mask you polish and defend every day. This hidden struggle drains more energy than any storm outside of you. The self-image is built piece by piece over the years. From childhood, you learn to attach your worth to labels: smart, kind, strong, attractive, successful. Some of these images are given by parents or teachers, others are carved out by culture, others are chosen by you to feel safe or admired. The result is a fragile construction that requires endless maintenance. You wake up every day and put it on, adjusting it for whoever is watching, terrified that cracks might show. This image feels like protection, but it is a prison. You spend so much effort trying to appear consistent, to live up to the identity you have clung to, that you forget who you are beneath it. You censor your words, silence your feelings, force yourself into roles that exhaust you, all in service of a picture that was never real. The image becomes a mask that hides both your weaknesses and your freedom. The energy spent protecting this mask is enormous. You replay conversations in your head, worried about how you came across. You post curated versions of your life online, shaping how strangers see you. You avoid risks because failure would crack the identity you've built. You defend opinions you no longer believe in because they are tied to your image. All of this creates tension, a constant inner pressure to maintain control over how you are seen. The tragedy is that identity is never fixed. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago, or even yesterday. Every experience reshapes you, every moment transforms you. Yet the mind clings to an outdated story, demanding that you stay the same. This clinging creates suffering because reality is always changing while the image resists. Liberation begins the moment you allow the image to dissolve. Dissolving the self-image does not mean losing yourself. It means releasing the false walls you have built so the true, fluid, living self can breathe. It means admitting you are not only strong but also fragile, not only wise but also foolish, not only light but also shadow. It means dropping the performance and meeting life without a script. This openness is not weakness, it is freedom. Look at how much conflict arises in relationships from the clash of self-images. Each person clings to who they think they are and who they think the other should be. Arguments are rarely about reality. They are about the protection of pride, the defense of identity. The fight is not over what happened, but over what it means for the image we guard. When you let the mask dissolve, the fight softens because there is nothing left to protect. You can listen without fear, speak without disguise, and connect without walls. At a deeper level, the self-image is tied to ego, the constant I, me, mine, that Buddhism warns against. The ego thrives on comparison, on being better than, more important than, more deserving than. It fears being exposed as ordinary, so it works tirelessly to inflate itself. But the more you feed it, the hungrier it becomes. Ego can never rest because it is built on the illusion of permanence in a world of impermanence. The more you identify with it, the more fragile you feel. To let go of the self-image is to step into the truth of impermanence. You allow yourself to change without fear of contradiction. You no longer need to be consistent with an old story. You allow yourself to be a beginner, to fail, to grow, to evolve. This flexibility is a deeper strength than the rigid armor of ego. It frees you from the exhausting need to prove yourself, because you recognize there is no fixed self to prove. Consider how much creativity is blocked by self-image. The child draws without worrying whether the picture is good. The adult hesitates, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of being judged. The image whispers, "You are not that kind of person. Stay in your lane. Don't risk embarrassment." When the image dissolves, creativity flows again. You allow yourself to try, to explore, to make mistakes, to learn. You rediscover the freedom that children live in naturally. Self-image also shapes how you experience failure. When you are attached to being seen as successful, failure feels like death. It threatens your identity, so you avoid risks and shrink from challenges. But when the image dissolves, failure loses its sting. It is no longer an attack on who you are, but simply another step in learning. You can fall without shame because you no longer need to defend an image of perfection. There is also freedom in relationships when you stop clinging to identity. You no longer need to be the strong one, the funny one, the wise one. You allow yourself to be human, to be seen as you are. Others may be surprised, but in time they too feel relief, because your openness gives them permission to drop their masks. Connection becomes authentic because it is no longer between two performances, but between two living beings. The Buddhist teaching of no self, or anatta, points directly to this truth. The self you defend is not solid. It is a collection of shifting elements: body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. None of these remain the same from moment to moment. To see this clearly is to realize there is nothing permanent to protect. The image is smoke, not stone. When you release it, you return to the fluid reality of being, a self that is always changing, always alive. The practical path to dissolving self-image begins with awareness. Notice how often your decisions are guided not by truth, but by the need to protect how you appear. Notice how often you hide emotions because they don't fit the role you want to play. Notice how much tension arises when someone challenges your story of yourself. Each moment of awareness weakens the grip of the mask. Courage is also required. It takes courage to be vulnerable, to admit you don't know, to allow yourself to be imperfect. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is the soil where intimacy, creativity, and growth are born. The image resists vulnerability because it fears exposure, but the soul longs for it because it is the doorway to authenticity. Letting go of self-image also transforms how you relate to success and failure, praise and blame. Normally, we cling to praise to inflate the image and resist blame to protect it. But when the image dissolves, praise and blame lose their grip. You accept praise without addiction, blame without collapse. You remain steady because your worth is no longer tied to how others see you. This steadiness is not indifference, it is deeper engagement. Without the filter of identity, you respond to situations directly. You speak because there is something true to say, not because it fits your role. You act because it matters, not because it will maintain your reputation. You live more fully because you are no longer split between who you are and who you think you should be. The liberation that comes from letting the image dissolve is profound. You discover a lightness, a sense of relief, because you no longer have to carry the endless burden of pretending. You stop wasting energy defending what was never real. That energy returns to you, free for creativity, for compassion, for presence. The deepest truth is that you were never the mask. You were always the awareness behind it, the open space in which all identities arise and pass. When you rest in that awareness, life becomes less about performance and more about direct experience. You feel the wind without labeling yourself as a nature lover. You help someone without needing to be called generous. You create without needing to be seen as an artist. You simply live. This is the freedom hidden within letting go of self-image. It is the quiet joy of no longer needing to prove or defend, the spaciousness of allowing yourself to be fluid and changing. When the mask dissolves, what remains is not emptiness but fullness, the fullness of being alive without conditions. And this is where true liberation begins. When the heavy mask of self-image falls away, you are left standing in a more open space. Without the need to protect who you think you are, the world begins to feel different. There is less tension, less pressure to perform, less fear of being exposed. But this openness leads to an even deeper realization that you are not a separate, isolated being at all. Every breath, every thought, every step you take depends on countless conditions beyond your control. To see this is to touch the heart of dependent origination, the Buddhist truth that everything arises together, shaped by infinite causes and conditions. And from this vision, trust in the universe begins to grow. Dependent origination reveals that nothing exists independently. Your body, for example, did not create itself. It formed through the meeting of your parents, through food grown from the soil, through sunlight that nourished the crops, through water that has been circulating the planet for millions of years. Even now, your life is sustained by farmers, factory workers, transport systems, the ecosystems that provide air and food, the communities that create shelter and care. To say, "This is mine," or "I am separate," ignores this web. You are carried constantly by forces far greater than yourself. This truth is both humbling and liberating. Humbling because it dissolves the illusion of independence we cling to. We like to believe that success is purely personal, that achievements are self-made, that we alone are responsible for who we have become. But if you trace the conditions that shaped your path, the teachers who guided you, the opportunities that arose, the support you received, even the challenges that forced you to grow, you see that nothing happened in isolation. Liberation arises because this recognition softens the burden of control. You no longer feel the crushing weight of needing to carry everything alone. You begin to trust the larger flow that holds you. This insight also transforms how you see suffering. When something painful happens, the mind often demands to know why. Why me? Why now? But dependent origination shows that events do not arise from a single cause. They arise from countless factors interwoven across time. A conflict with a friend may be shaped not only by what was said today, but by their childhood wounds, by your own unspoken fears, by circumstances that stretched far before this moment. To see this does not excuse harm, but it releases the obsession with blame. Life is not a simple equation of fault, it is a vast unfolding of conditions. This understanding makes space for compassion, both for yourself and for others. Trusting the universe through dependent origination also means recognizing that life cannot be micromanaged. When you see that outcomes depend on infinite conditions, you stop demanding certainty from the future. You still act with wisdom and care, but you release the illusion that effort alone guarantees results. A farmer plants seeds, but whether they flourish depends on soil, weather, insects, and countless unseen forces. In the same way, you plant the seeds of your intentions, but their blossoming depends on causes beyond your reach. This is not discouraging, it is freeing. You can give your best without being enslaved by the need to control the rest. Every breath you take carries this truth. You inhale air created by forests and oceans, by the work of tiny organisms you will never see. You exhale carbon dioxide that will feed plants, that will eventually feed animals, that will return to feed you again. You are not a single entity but part of a cycle, a vast rhythm that continues regardless of your plans. When you see this clearly, gratitude naturally arises. Life is no longer something you control, but something you participate in. This perspective also dissolves pride and judgment. If your life has moments of success, you know they rest on countless supports. If another's life is filled with struggle, you recognize the conditions that shaped their path may be vastly different from yours. This softens arrogance and awakens empathy. You stop seeing people as simply lazy or undeserving, and you start seeing the invisible webs of causes behind their situation. Compassion deepens because you know their suffering could have been yours under different conditions. Dependent origination also teaches patience. When you realize that outcomes depend on countless factors, you stop demanding that life move on your timeline. You understand that seeds take time to ripen, that some conditions are still forming, that forcing results only leads to frustration. Patience grows not from weakness, but from wisdom. You trust that when the conditions are right, what needs to unfold will unfold. There is also a profound lesson about identity hidden here. If everything you are arises from causes and conditions, then who is this self you cling to? Your thoughts arise from language you learned from others, from experiences that shaped your perspective, from emotions rooted in biology and environment. Your body is a collection of cells nourished by food you did not create. Your personality is molded by upbringing, culture, and time. The I you defend so fiercely is not an independent entity, but a flow of conditions, a pattern arising and passing. This realization softens the grip of ego and opens the door to deeper trust. Trust in the universe does not mean blind faith. It means seeing reality clearly. It means knowing that just as countless conditions supported your life today, countless conditions will continue to carry you tomorrow. It means understanding that even difficulties arise as part of this web, and they too can become conditions for growth. What feels unbearable in the moment may later reveal itself as the soil where wisdom blossomed. The recognition of interdependence gives you the courage to keep walking, even when the path is uncertain. This wisdom also has practical implications. When you see life as interconnected, you act differently. You take greater care with your choices because you know they ripple outward. A word spoken in anger can shape someone's day. A small act of kindness can ripple through countless lives. The recognition of dependent origination makes you more mindful, not out of fear but out of reverence for the web of life you are part of. It also transforms how you carry burdens. When hardship comes, instead of saying, "This is all on me," you remember the network of support that exists. Friends, communities, even strangers contribute to your survival. The earth itself carries you with air, food, and shelter. You are never as alone as the mind tells you. To see this is to relax into trust, not in the sense that everything will be easy, but in the sense that you are not abandoned in the struggle. This trust is especially powerful in moments of uncertainty. The future will always be unknown because it depends on conditions not yet formed. Resistance to uncertainty creates fear, but acceptance of interdependence creates trust. You stop demanding to know how everything will turn out and start living with openness. Life becomes less about prediction and more about participation. The teaching of dependent origination is like a mirror showing you the truth of existence. Everything you have, everything you are, everything you experience arises because of countless causes that stretch far beyond your sight. To live with this awareness is to bow to the vastness of life, to recognize that control was never the point, and that trust is the only sane response. This trust does not numb you, it awakens you. You engage more deeply because you see how precious each moment is, how rare the conditions are that allow it to exist. You live with gratitude because you see the invisible hands that hold you. You release pride because you see you did not build your life alone. You release despair because you see you are never truly unsupported. In the end, dependent origination is not only a doctrine to be studied, it is an invitation to live differently. It asks you to see through the illusion of separateness, to let go of the burden of absolute control, to awaken compassion for the struggles of others, and to rest in trust that the same web that has carried you this far will continue to hold you. And when you truly see this, life itself changes. You no longer feel like a solitary traveler lost in chaos. You feel like part of a vast and mysterious dance, supported by countless partners you may never meet, carried by forces you cannot name, moving in harmony with a universe that has always been unfolding exactly as it must. This is the trust born of interdependence, the trust that makes every breath a miracle, every step a gift, and every moment an opportunity to live with openness and peace. When the truth of interdependence becomes clear, when you begin to see that every moment of your existence is the fruit of countless conditions, a deeper trust in life begins to take root. You realize that nothing is isolated, that you are always supported in ways the eye cannot see. But even with this wisdom, the mind continues to weave subtle traps. One of the most persistent is expectation, the quiet voice that insists life must unfold a certain way. Interdependence teaches us that everything arises from infinite causes, yet expectation demands a single outcome, the one we desire. This clash between reality and fantasy is the soil where frustration, disappointment, and resentment grow. Expectations hide in nearly every corner of life. You wake with expectations about how the day should go, about how people should treat you, about how your efforts should bear fruit. You carry expectations of yourself, of your relationships, of your future. When life matches these inner scripts, you feel relief. When it doesn't, you suffer. The suffering does not come from life itself. It comes from the gap between reality and the story you wrote in your head. The Buddha pointed to this directly when he spoke of craving and aversion as roots of suffering. Expectation is a refined form of craving. It says, "This moment is not enough until it meets my conditions." It resists what is and clings to what should be. That clinging creates tension because life rarely cooperates. The world is too vast, too complex, too alive to bow to your personal script. The flower blooms when it will, the person behaves as they do, the opportunity arrives or disappears according to causes beyond your control. Yet expectation fights this, and the result is restlessness. Dropping expectations does not mean abandoning responsibility or living without goals. It means releasing the inner demand that things must align with your script to be acceptable. It means loosening the grip of should and entering into a more honest relationship with what is. In that space, peace arises not because circumstances are perfect, but because the war between reality and your mind ends. Consider how expectations shape relationships. We often approach others not as they are, but as characters in our mental play. Partners should love in certain ways, friends should always understand, family should always agree. When they do not, conflict erupts not because they are wrong, but because they did not perform according to the script you wrote without telling them. To drop expectation is to meet people freshly, without demanding they conform. This does not mean tolerating harm, but it means releasing the constant pressure of, "You must be this way for me to be at peace." Self-expectation may be the most punishing of all. The voice inside whispers constantly, "You should be more successful, more disciplined, more attractive, more spiritual. These demands weigh heavily because they are endless. No matter what you achieve, the mind invents a higher standard. You end up chasing an image of yourself that never arrives. To release this is not to abandon growth, but to grow from acceptance rather than from shame. You begin where you are, not where the should demands you to be. Dropping expectation also transforms how you meet the future. The mind clings to images of how life must unfold: the career path, the relationship arc, the retirement plan. When reality diverges, anxiety surges. But life has never promised to obey your vision. The future is born from infinite causes, most beyond your sight. To live chained to expectation is to guarantee constant disappointment. To release it is to step into openness, where the unknown becomes not a threat, but a space of possibility. This does not mean apathy. You can still act, still set intentions, still work toward what matters. But the difference is profound. You act without insisting on a particular outcome. You sow seeds with care, but you do not demand the harvest look exactly as you dreamed. This balance of effort and release is the heart of peace. When the results come, you meet them as they are, not as they should have been. Expectations also distort how we experience the present. A meal is less enjoyed because it was not as good as expected. A moment is overlooked because it does not match the imagined ideal. Life becomes a series of comparisons between what is and what could have been. The beauty of the present slips away unnoticed because the mind is too busy measuring it against fantasy. Releasing expectation reopens the senses. You taste, hear, see, and feel directly, without the filter of comparison. There is wisdom in emptiness here. Expectation fills the mind with rigid shapes. When they collapse, suffering arises. But emptiness is spacious. It allows life to enter without obstruction. In emptiness, events arise and pass without the added burden of "this should not be happening." Peace comes not from controlling circumstances, but from emptying the mind of its demands. Even spiritually, expectation creates traps. You may expect meditation to bring instant calm, expect wisdom to arrive quickly, expect awakening to unfold according to schedule. When these expectations are unmet, frustration replaces curiosity, and the practice becomes another battlefield. Dropping expectation does not weaken practice, it deepens it. You sit not to achieve a specific state, but to meet whatever arises. That openness is the true path to transformation. On a collective level, expectations fuel much of the world's discontent. Societies build ideals of success, beauty, and achievement, and individuals suffer when they fail to meet them. These expectations are illusions, shifting with culture and time, yet they shape lives profoundly. To see their emptiness is to step outside the trap. You recognize that what should be is a social story, not an ultimate truth. From there, you are free to live more authentically, guided by wisdom rather than by conformity. The practice of dropping expectation is ongoing. It requires vigilance because the mind clings to should by habit. Each time you notice yourself saying, "It should not be this way," you are offered a chance to release. Each release opens more space for peace. Over time, you begin to see how much suffering was self-created, how much freedom was blocked by your own mental demands. This practice also cultivates resilience. When life does not match your desires, you do not collapse. Without expectation, you can adapt, adjust, and continue. Flexibility grows because you are no longer bound to one rigid outcome. What once would have shattered you now simply redirects you. Life becomes less of a battlefield and more of a dance. Dropping expectation does not mean abandoning hope. Hope is gentle. It leans toward possibility without demanding certainty. Expectation is rigid. It insists on one outcome and resists all others. Hope keeps the heart open, expectation closes it. The wisdom is in knowing the difference. This teaching ultimately returns to the essence of Buddhist thought. Suffering arises from clinging. Expectation is clinging to the future, to a particular shape of reality. To drop it is to return to the present, where life is already complete. In this way, expectation is revealed as empty, not solid, not necessary, not the foundation of peace. What remains when you let it go is a freedom so simple it feels radical, the freedom to live in harmony with what is. And when this freedom deepens, you begin to see that life has always been enough. Not because it gives you everything you want, but because it gives you itself unfolding, changing, alive. The doorway to peace has been here all along, hidden only by the heavy curtains of should. Pull them aside, and the light of the present floods in. This is the emptiness of expectations and the fullness of reality itself. When the grip of expectations finally loosens, life begins to feel lighter. You no longer demand that reality bend to your script, and in that freedom there is peace. Yet even when you learn to meet the present without the weight of should, you cannot escape one truth. Everything you love will eventually change or leave. Possessions break, relationships shift, loved ones pass away. Loss cuts deeper than unmet expectations because it touches the heart of attachment itself. But within that very pain lies a hidden gift. Grief, when met with openness, can break the shell of the self and awaken a compassion that reaches beyond personal sorrow into a shared humanity. Loss often feels unbearable because it rips away the illusion of permanence. You grow used to someone's presence, to the comfort of their voice, to the certainty of their companionship. When that is taken, the heart feels raw, exposed, defenseless. The same happens when a dream collapses, when health declines, when a role you've lived in dissolves. There is an emptiness where something once was, and the mind instinctively resists it. Yet grief is not just a wound, it is a teacher. It reveals that love is fragile, that life is fleeting, that nothing is truly under your control. To allow yourself to feel this truth without turning away is to begin seeing with new eyes. What makes loss so transformative is that it strips away pretense. In ordinary life, it is easy to hide behind roles and routines, to distract yourself with possessions and goals. But loss breaks those defenses. It confronts you with vulnerability, with the raw fact that you cannot protect yourself from change. In this vulnerability, the boundaries of self begin to soften. You realize that your pain is not separate from the pain of others, that everyone, at some point, must face similar losses. This recognition is the seed of compassion. When you feel your own grief fully, you begin to sense the grief of others in a deeper way. The widow, the orphan, the friend who lost a job, the stranger whose home was destroyed suddenly, their pain is not abstract but intimately familiar. You know what it means to ache, to feel empty, to long for what is gone. This resonance makes the heart more tender. Judgment fades, and empathy arises naturally. In Buddhist practice, loss is often reframed as an opportunity for awakening. Not because the pain is denied, but because it is honored as a doorway. The Buddha himself spoke of dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness of life, as the starting point of wisdom. Loss is dukkha made visible. By turning toward it instead of away, you learn not only about impermanence, but about the interconnectedness of all beings who share this fragility. Your grief becomes a bridge to others, rather than a wall isolating you in sorrow. The compassion hidden in loss also reshapes how you relate to love. When you know that every connection will one day end, you love more deeply, not less. You stop taking people for granted. You listen more carefully, speak more kindly, forgive more easily, because you know the chance may not come again. Loss teaches you the preciousness of presence. It awakens a love that is less about possession and more about reverence. Loss also humbles the ego. When everything is going well, it is easy to believe you are in control, that your strength or intelligence protects you. But loss reminds you that no one is exempt. No amount of power, wealth, or preparation can shield you from the reality of change. This humbling can feel harsh, but it is also freeing. It breaks down arrogance and replaces it with humility, which in turn opens the heart to others. You see that suffering is not a sign of failure, but a universal condition. The process of grief is often described in stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, but these stages are not linear. They move back and forth, sometimes repeating, sometimes overlapping. The key is not to rush through them, but to allow them fully. Each stage reveals something about the human heart. Denial shows how deeply we crave stability. Anger shows the mind's resistance to helplessness. Bargaining reveals our desire to negotiate with reality. Depression uncovers the depth of our longing. Acceptance, when it comes, opens the space where compassion grows. Each stage, painful as it is, softens the heart if met with patience. Loss also invites reflection on what truly matters. When someone dies, their possessions, their titles, their accolades no longer define them. What remains in memory are their kindness, their presence, their love. In the same way, when you face your own losses, you begin to question what is essential. The trivial fades, the authentic shines brighter. This clarity shapes how you live moving forward. You begin to prioritize connection over competition, presence over productivity, sincerity over appearance. There is a practice in Buddhism called Tonglen, where you breathe in the suffering of others and breathe out relief and compassion. This practice is especially powerful in grief. When your own heart is breaking, you expand the circle of awareness to include all beings experiencing loss. You breathe with them, suffer with them, send them compassion. This shifts grief from isolation into connection. It transforms your pain into fuel for empathy, reminding you that your sorrow links you to the entire human family. Loss also changes how you see time. Before grief, the future stretches endlessly. After grief, time feels fragile, uncertain, precious. This shift is painful, but it also wakes you up. You begin to treasure ordinary moments, the sound of laughter, the warmth of touch, the simple presence of those you love. Loss makes you aware that these moments are temporary and therefore infinitely valuable. In this way, grief sharpens gratitude, teaching you to live more fully now, not in some distant tomorrow. The compassion that grows from loss is not sentimental, it is grounded in reality. It does not deny pain or sugarcoat suffering. Instead, it says, "I know this ache, and I know you carry it too." It is the recognition that behind every face you meet is a story of loss. Parents, friends, dreams, health, safety. Everyone has been touched by impermanence. This recognition dissolves barriers between self and other, allowing genuine kindness to flow. Loss also opens the door to forgiveness. When you understand how fleeting life is, grudges lose their grip. Anger feels less important than love, resentment less important than peace. The awareness of mortality makes reconciliation more urgent because you know time is not guaranteed. Grief reminds you that relationships are fragile and that the chance to forgive may vanish sooner than you expect. Compassion grows not only for others, but for yourself, as you release the burden of carrying old wounds. On the deepest level, loss teaches that the heart can break and still remain open. In fact, it is often through breaking that the heart expands. The cracks created by grief become windows through which compassion shines. Instead of closing off to protect yourself, you learn that true protection lies in openness, in allowing pain to soften you rather than harden you. This openness transforms not only your inner life, but the world around you. A compassionate heart responds differently. It reaches out to comfort, to listen, to support. It acts with patience instead of judgment, with kindness instead of harshness. The compassion born of loss is not abstract, it is lived in every interaction. It shapes how communities heal, how societies care for the vulnerable, how humanity grows more humane. Loss is never easy. It shakes you to the core, strips you bare, and leaves you vulnerable. But if you allow yourself to face it fully, if you resist the urge to numb or deny, you discover a strength you did not know you had. That strength is not hard or unfeeling. It is tender, expansive, deeply human. It is the strength of compassion hidden inside the very grief you wish to avoid. And when you see this clearly, loss itself becomes a teacher. It shows you that nothing lasts, but that the love you give and the compassion you awaken ripple far beyond the moment. It shows you that your pain connects you to every living being. It shows you that even in endings, there is a possibility for the heart to open wider than before. This is the gift hidden in grief, the light that shines through loss, the compassion that turns suffering into wisdom. When grief breaks you open and compassion begins to flow, you realize that loss is not the end of life, but a different way of seeing it. Pain softens the edges of the self and shows you how deeply connected you are to all beings. Yet even as compassion grows, the world around you still trembles with uncertainty. Plans collapse, disasters strike, conflicts erupt, and everything you thought was stable can dissolve overnight. This is where another lesson arises. Learning to trust the universe not in calm moments, but in the midst of chaos. Chaos unsettles us because it reveals the limits of our control. A single phone call can change the course of your life. An accident, an illness, a global crisis. These events remind us that stability is not promised. The mind reacts with fear, scrambling for explanations, building walls of worry, clinging to anything that feels predictable. But chaos is not only destruction. It is also the breaking of old patterns, the shaking loose of illusions, the opening of space where something new can emerge. To trust in chaos is to meet the unknown, not as an enemy but as a sacred invitation to surrender. Uncertainty has always been part of life, but modern culture conditions us to resist it at all costs. We build routines, create schedules, rely on technology, and surround ourselves with systems that promise safety. Yet no system can remove uncertainty, it can only mask it. When those systems collapse, the truth re-emerges. Life has never been predictable. Birth and death, success and failure, joy and sorrow, they arrive without warning. The challenge is not to eliminate this unpredictability, but to learn how to live within it without being broken. The Buddhist path offers guidance here. It teaches that clinging to certainty is a root of suffering because it demands from life what it cannot give. To release this demand is to discover a peace that chaos cannot touch. When you stop insisting that life must always be ordered, you become more flexible, more resilient. You stop drowning in fear when the ground shifts because you no longer expect it to stay still. This trust is not naive. It does not deny danger or minimize suffering. It acknowledges the reality of hardship, but refuses to add fear on top of it. Fear imagines countless futures and suffers through each one, while trust remains steady in the present, meeting chaos as it comes. Trust does not guarantee safety, but it does guarantee freedom, the freedom to live fully even when tomorrow is unclear. Chaos also reveals the hidden patterns of interdependence. What looks like pure disorder often carries seeds of transformation. A storm destroys, but it also renews the land. A personal crisis shatters identity, but it also forces growth. Trusting the universe in chaos means allowing yourself to see not only what is lost, but also what might be born. It means widening your vision beyond immediate fear to glimpse the larger unfolding. This perspective shifts how you respond to uncertainty. Instead of reacting with panic, you pause. Instead of trying to control everything, you look for the next wise step. Instead of resisting, you adapt. This flexibility is not weakness, but the strength of a tree that bends in the wind and survives the storm. Chaos becomes less of a threat and more of a teacher, showing you resilience you didn't know you had. Trusting the universe in chaos also reshapes how you view time. Fear lives in the future, spinning stories of what could go wrong. Trust lives in the present, where the next breath is still available, where life is still moving through you. By anchoring in what is here, you release the weight of imagined disasters. You discover that even in turmoil, moments of beauty remain: the sound of laughter, the kindness of a stranger, the simple fact of being alive. Chaos can also break down the illusion of separation. In times of crisis, communities come together. Strangers help one another. People remember their shared humanity. The same uncertainty that frightens us also reveals how much we need each other. Trust in the universe deepens when you recognize that you are not facing chaos alone, but as part of a greater whole. This recognition awakens compassion, courage, and solidarity. There is also a spiritual depth to chaos. It reminds you that life is larger than your plans, larger than your control, larger than your fears. It asks you to bow to mystery, to admit that you do not and cannot know everything. This humility is not defeat, it is the beginning of wisdom. When you release the need for certainty, you make space for wonder. You begin to see chaos not as the collapse of meaning, but as the opening of infinite possibility. The practice of trusting chaos is cultivated in small ways. Each time plans change, you can resist or you can adapt. Each time life surprises you, you can cling or you can flow. Over time, these choices train the heart to meet uncertainty with steadiness. Then, when greater storms come, you are not shattered. You bend, you breathe, you trust that the same universe that has carried you this far will carry you still. Trust in chaos also invites you to reframe fear. Fear is not a signal to freeze, but a reminder to wake up. It shows you where attachment lies, where expectations grip too tightly, where the ego demands control. By meeting fear with awareness, you loosen its hold. Fear becomes a guide, pointing you toward the places where trust is needed most. Chaos, then, is not an interruption of life, but an expression of it. Life has always been unpredictable, always shifting. The attempt to make it otherwise is what exhausts you. When you see this, chaos no longer feels like a violation, but like part of the sacred dance of existence. Trust becomes not just a practice, but a way of living, a way of bowing to the mystery without fear, a way of meeting the unknown with open hands instead of clenched fists. To live this way is to walk with courage. Not the courage of denial or bravado, but the quiet courage of presence, the courage to take each step without needing to know where the path leads, the courage to let go of guarantees and find peace in the unfolding itself, the courage to release fear and embrace mystery. And when you live with this kind of trust, chaos no longer owns you. It still arrives, but it does not define you. You become a witness to the storm rather than a prisoner of it. You discover that within uncertainty there is freedom, within mystery there is beauty, and within chaos there is the invitation to awaken fully to life as it is. When you begin to trust the universe, even in the middle of chaos, you discover a rare kind of freedom. Fear loses its grip, and the unknown is no longer an enemy but a teacher. Yet here, in this openness, another hidden obstacle can quietly creep in. It is subtle, refined, and often disguised as wisdom itself. It is the attachment not to possessions, not to people, not even to certainty, but to your own spiritual progress. The very path meant to dissolve ego can become the place where ego hides most skillfully. This attachment shows up when you start measuring your growth, comparing your present self to your past, or worse, comparing yourself to others on their journeys. You may not cling to material wealth anymore, but you begin to cling to achievements of a different kind. Hours of meditation, insights gained, books read, teachings memorized. You start craving states of calm, clarity, or transcendence, and you subtly feel proud when you believe you have advanced further than before. This is the ego disguised in robes, and it is perhaps more dangerous than obvious clinging, because it feels noble. The trap lies in the belief that enlightenment is something to own, that awakening is a possession to acquire, that growth is a badge of honor. But true liberation is not something that can be added to the self. It is the dissolving of the very self that wants to claim progress. When spiritual practice becomes a project of self-improvement, it keeps you bound to the same cycle of craving and aversion that you hope to escape. Notice how easily this appears in thought. You sit to meditate and expect peace. When the mind races, you feel frustrated, as if you have failed. You measure the session against your idea of how it should be. But who is judging? It is the self-image, quietly demanding proof of advancement. The moment you turn practice into performance, the subtle craving arises. The practice has not failed, you have simply fallen into the trap of expectation. Attachment to spiritual progress also reveals itself in the desire for recognition. Even if not spoken aloud, there can be a hidden wish to be seen as wise, mindful, awakened. The ego loves to wear spirituality as a mask, to show humility outwardly while secretly swelling with pride. This attachment is subtle because it hides beneath good intentions. But the heart knows the difference between genuine openness and the hunger for validation. Another layer of this trap is the fixation on mystical experiences. Perhaps during meditation you feel a deep stillness, or during prayer a profound joy, or in contemplation a sense of unity with everything. These states are precious, but they are not the goal. They arise and pass like everything else. To cling to them, to chase them, is to remain bound. The teachings remind us. Do not mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. Experiences are fingers. Awakening is seeing beyond them. To release this subtle craving requires honesty. You must be willing to ask yourself, why am I practicing? Is it to achieve something, to prove something, to become someone? Or is it to let go, to dissolve the grasping, to meet life as it is? The shift is profound. When practice is about adding to the self, the ego thrives. When practice is about dissolving the self, the ego loses ground. This letting go also reshapes how you see time. The ego says, I should be further along by now. It compares, measures, calculates progress. But the path of awakening is not linear. It unfolds in its own rhythm, often in ways that defy measurement. Some days clarity shines, other days confusion reigns. Both are part of the unfolding. To cling to progress is to resist this rhythm. To trust the process is to allow both clarity and confusion to be teachers. Spiritual attachment can also create division. When you believe you have advanced, you may unconsciously separate yourself from others, seeing them as less evolved. This quiet arrogance corrodes compassion. The essence of the path is connection, yet the ego uses progress to reinforce separation. To see this clearly is to humble yourself again, to remember that wisdom is not about standing above others, but about walking with them. There is a teaching that enlightenment is not about becoming extraordinary, but about becoming ordinary without resistance. The ego resists this because it wants to be special, unique, beyond. But liberation lies not in standing apart, but in fully embracing the simple truth of what is breathing, walking, caring, loving. To release attachment to progress is to rediscover the beauty of ordinariness. Another danger of this trap is discouragement. When you expect progress and it doesn't arrive as you hoped, despair can set in. You may think, "I am not good enough for this path," or "I will never awaken." But these thoughts themselves are more clinging, the clinging to failure as identity. The antidote is remembering that the path is not about becoming perfect, but about continually letting go. Even despair can be a teacher if you meet it with openness rather than judgment. The subtle ego trap also thrives on comparison across traditions or teachers. You may think, "This practice is superior, this teacher is more advanced, this path is the best." But these judgments are still rooted in clinging to identity, my path, my tradition, my insight. True wisdom sees value in many forms, without needing to claim superiority. The way out of this trap is through humility and surrender. Humility means recognizing that awakening is not your achievement. It is not something you grasp, but something revealed when clinging falls away. Surrender means trusting the unfolding, even when it looks like regression. It means showing up with openness rather than striving for proof. It means practicing not to gain but to release. There is freedom in this shift. You no longer sit to meditate hoping to reach a state. You sit simply to be with what is. You no longer read or study to become more knowledgeable. You learn to deepen compassion and wisdom. You no longer measure yourself against others. You walk side by side, recognizing that all beings are struggling and awakening in their own way. The paradox is that true progress comes only when you stop clinging to progress. When you release the demand to be enlightened, you open the space where awakening can naturally arise. It comes not as a possession, but as a dissolving, not as an achievement, but as a return. The self cannot claim it because it arrives when the self is quiet. In this way, the path becomes lighter. Practice is no longer a project of self-perfection, but a dance of letting go. Each moment, each breath, each step is enough. The ego may still whisper, but you see it more clearly, and with clarity comes freedom. To live this way is to embody the essence of the teaching, non-clinging, even to the path itself. The Buddha compared his teachings to a raft used to cross a river. Once the crossing is made, the raft is not carried on the back, it is left behind. The path is meant to free you, not to become another weight. To cling to the raft is to miss the freedom waiting on the other shore. Releasing attachment to spiritual progress is perhaps the most radical letting go, because it means letting go even of the path. But in this release, the deepest peace arises, the peace of no longer needing to be anyone, achieve anything, or prove something. It is the peace of simply being, awake to life as it unfolds, free from the subtle chains of even the noblest craving. When the subtle craving for spiritual progress is finally exposed, you begin to see how even the noblest pursuits can become another prison of the ego. The relief that comes from letting go of this attachment opens a deeper space, inside a space no longer crowded with comparisons, measurements, or quiet pride. Yet emptiness itself can feel unfamiliar, even unsettling. If the old striving falls away, what is left to guide you? The answer lies in rediscovering a way of seeing that is simple, pure, and alive, the freedom of beginner's mind. Beginner's mind is not ignorance. It is not about forgetting what you have learned or dismissing wisdom gained. It is about meeting each moment without the heavy burden of certainty. It is about entering life with openness rather than conclusions, with curiosity rather than judgment, with wonder rather than the arrogance of knowing. To live with beginner's mind is to pour out the stale water of assumptions so the cup can be filled again and again. The world often teaches us that knowledge is power, that certainty is safety, that experience should harden into expertise. But the more certain we become, the less we see. We look at a tree and say, "I know what that is," and the seeing ends. We meet a person and categorize them, and the encounter becomes dull. We approach a practice with fixed ideas about what should happen, and we blind ourselves to what is actually happening. Beginner's mind dissolves these filters. It invites us to look freshly, as though for the first time, so that the ordinary becomes extraordinary again. This openness requires trust in the universe, because certainty is one of the mind's favorite shields. We cling to opinions, beliefs, and conclusions because they give us the illusion of control. To let them go is to admit we do not know, and that admission can feel vulnerable. Yet it is in this vulnerability that real strength arises. To say, "I do not know, but I am willing to learn," is to align with the flow of life rather than resist it. It is to surrender control without surrendering awareness. Beginner's mind also breaks the habits of judgment that keep us trapped in dissatisfaction. The experienced mind says, "This is boring. I've seen this before. There is nothing new here." The beginner's mind says, "What is this? What can I discover now?" In practice, this transforms everything. A simple walk becomes rich with detail, the sound of leaves, the texture of air, the play of light. A conversation becomes deeper because you truly listen instead of assuming you already understand. Meditation becomes alive because you are not chasing past states, but meeting the mind as it is today. Living this way also reshapes how you meet difficulty. The experienced mind jumps to conclusions. This is bad, this will ruin me, this always happens. Beginner's mind pauses, watches, and stays open. What is here? What can be learned? In that openness, new possibilities arise. What once seemed like disaster may reveal itself as a turning point. What once felt unbearable may become the very soil where strength grows. Beginner's mind does not resist reality with pre-written stories. It allows reality to show itself. There is also a humility in this approach. Beginner's mind admits that the universe is vast, that our understanding is limited, that certainty is always partial. This humility softens the ego's grip and deepens trust. You stop needing to have all the answers. You stop pretending to know what will happen tomorrow. You begin to rest in the mystery, not with fear, but with curiosity. Each day becomes a discovery rather than a repetition. This way of being has practical power as well. In relationships, beginner's mind keeps love alive. Instead of assuming you already know your partner or your friend, you meet them anew each day. You listen with fresh ears. You see them with fresh eyes. And in doing so, you discover layers you had overlooked. Many conflicts arise not because of what is said, but because of the weight of assumptions carried into the conversation. Beginner's mind drops the assumptions and allows genuine connection. In learning, this approach keeps growth alive. The moment you believe you already know enough, curiosity dies. But when you return to the posture of a student, you remain open to being taught by everyone and everything. A child's question, a stranger's story, even a mistake can become a teacher. This openness keeps the mind young, agile, and resilient, no matter your age. The spiritual path itself becomes lighter with beginner's mind. Without it, practice hardens into routine and dogma. With it, practice stays alive. Each breath, each step, each moment of stillness is new. You are no longer chasing experiences or clinging to insights. You are simply present, open, available. In this way, the path is not a ladder to climb, but a field to explore. Beginner's mind also helps dissolve fear. Fear thrives on stories of the future. I know what will happen, and it will be terrible. But beginner's mind says, I do not know, and that is okay. This openness breaks fear's grip because it refuses to collapse the infinite possibilities of life into a single doomed outcome. Trust in the universe grows naturally from this posture. You no longer need guarantees. You no longer need certainty. You are willing to walk step by step, discovering as you go. Children embody this spirit naturally. They approach the world with wide eyes and endless curiosity. They ask questions without shame. They try without fear of failure. They find wonder in what adults dismiss as ordinary. Beginner's mind does not mean returning to childhood, but it does mean recovering that openness, that freshness, that willingness to be surprised. It is a return to innocence, not of ignorance, but of direct, unfiltered presence. The challenge is that the older we grow, the more the mind craves certainty. We mistake accumulated experience for absolute truth, forgetting that life is always changing. What worked yesterday may not work today. What seemed true before may no longer apply. Beginner's mind keeps us adaptable. It allows us to let go of rigid identities and outdated beliefs, to remain supple in the face of change. In a world that is always shifting, this flexibility is essential for peace. This openness also transforms how we relate to the unknown. Instead of filling it with fear, we approach it with curiosity. Instead of demanding that it resolve into certainty, we allow it to be a mystery. Beginner's mind bows to the fact that life is larger than our understanding, and in that bow we find freedom. We no longer need to shrink the vastness of existence into the narrow walls of our conclusions. We allow life to be vast, and we allow ourselves to rest within it. To live with beginner's mind is to walk with trust. Trust not because you know where the path leads, but because you are open to discovering it. Trust not because you are certain of outcomes, but because you are willing to meet them as they come. Trust not because you are strong, but because you are humble enough to learn. This is the freedom that comes when the cup is emptied, when certainty is released, when openness replaces control. It is not the freedom of having mastered everything, but the freedom of no longer needing to. It is the lightness of living without the heavy armor of conclusions, the joy of discovering again and again, the peace of being fully alive in the unfolding mystery of each moment. And when this freedom deepens, life itself becomes your teacher. Every sound, every touch, every word, every silence carries wisdom, because you are no longer blocking it with the belief that you already know. The universe speaks constantly, but only the open mind can hear. Beginner's mind is that openness, that listening, that wonder, and in it lies the trust that the path will always reveal itself, one step, one breath, one moment at a time. When the freedom of beginner's mind takes root, you begin to taste life without the filters of certainty. Each moment feels lighter, each encounter more alive, because you are no longer confined by the weight of knowing. But this openness is quickly tested in the area of human connection. Relationships are where our deepest attachments show themselves, where clinging and grasping often hide beneath the language of love. We say we care, yet so often what we mean is, "I need you to stay as I want you to be." If beginner's mind teaches us to empty the cup, relationships challenge us to practice that emptiness where it matters most, by letting go of possession and allowing love to breathe. Love distorted by grasping becomes heavy. It suffocates both the giver and the receiver. When you hold someone too tightly, fear replaces freedom, and control disguises itself as devotion. But when love is lived with non-grasping, it flourishes like a flower left in sunlight, nourished by care, but never chained by ownership. Trusting the impermanence of connection is not a threat to intimacy, it is the soil in which true intimacy grows. We often mistake closeness for possession. We say, "my partner," "my friend," "my child," as if another human being could ever belong to us. This subtle language carries enormous weight. It suggests that their choices, their growth, their freedom must revolve around our desires. The heart becomes anxious at the thought of losing them, and so it clings. Yet clinging does not secure love, it corrodes it. The tighter you hold, the more love slips away, because love thrives in openness, not in chains. Relationships shaped by non-grasping begin with recognition of impermanence. No bond is guaranteed to last forever. People change, circumstances shift, lives move apart. To deny this truth is to live in constant fear of loss. To embrace it is to love more fully, knowing every moment together is precious. When you trust impermanence, you stop demanding permanence from people, and you start savoring the time you share without forcing it to fit an illusion of forever. This acceptance reshapes how conflict is handled. In grasping, conflict feels like a threat to survival. If they disagree, if they pull away, I might lose them. This fear drives defensiveness, anger, manipulation. In non-grasping, conflict is simply part of the rhythm of relationship. It is not proof of failure, but an opportunity for deeper understanding. Because you do not need the other to conform to your script, you can listen without fear, speak without hostility, and grow together without forcing unity. Non-grasping also transforms intimacy. When love is tied to possession, intimacy becomes a transaction. I give you affection if you give me security. But when love is free, intimacy becomes an offering with no demand. You share yourself not to control, but to connect. You give not because you fear losing, but because giving is the natural expression of care. This creates a depth of connection that clinging never achieves, because it is grounded in freedom, not in fear. There is a paradox here. The more you release, the deeper love becomes. When someone knows they are free to leave, yet they stay, the bond is genuine. When someone knows they can grow and change without losing your affection, trust deepens. Non-grasping removes the weight of conditions, allowing love to be chosen each day rather than demanded. This choice is what makes love alive. Self-awareness plays a crucial role. Many people enter relationships hoping to be completed, to be saved from loneliness or insecurity. This places an impossible burden on the other person and breeds grasping. I need you to fix me, to stay so I feel whole. But no one can carry this weight. Non-grasping begins when you recognize your own wholeness, when you stop demanding that another person be your cure. From that ground, love is no longer desperate, it is generous. This approach also dissolves jealousy. Jealousy thrives on possession, the belief that someone belongs to you and should never give attention elsewhere. Non-grasping shifts the perspective. You do not own their affection. You simply share in it for as long as it flows toward you. This does not mean tolerating betrayal, but it means releasing the illusion of ownership. When love is seen as a gift rather than a right, jealousy loses its power and gratitude takes its place. Even parenting is transformed by this perspective. Children are often seen as extensions of their parents, expected to fulfill dreams or maintain traditions. But children are not possessions. They are independent beings, entrusted to you for a time. Non-grasping parenting allows them to grow into themselves, to explore freely, to leave when it is time, without being chained by your expectations. This is the purest form of love, supporting without controlling, guiding without possessing. Non-grasping also reshapes endings. When relationships dissolve, clinging makes the pain unbearable. They should not have left. This should not be over. The mind spins stories of betrayal and failure. But when you have loved with openness, endings are still painful but less destructive. You can grieve with gratitude, honoring what was shared without demanding that it remain. The relationship becomes part of your journey, not a possession stolen from you. Trusting impermanence does not weaken bonds, it strengthens them. It brings urgency to presence, honesty to communication, depth to affection. Knowing that nothing is fixed encourages you to love more fiercely, more tenderly, more authentically. You stop postponing affection. You stop withholding gratitude. You stop assuming tomorrow will come. Non-grasping makes love raw and real because it is grounded in truth. This way of relating also deepens compassion. When you stop grasping, you begin to see the other not as a source of your comfort, but as a fellow being navigating their own suffering and impermanence. You listen with more patience, forgive with more ease, and support with more sincerity. Love ceases to be about meeting your needs and becomes about walking alongside another in their journey. The practice of non-grasping requires mindfulness. It means noticing when fear is pushing you to control, when insecurity is demanding possession, when ego is disguising itself as care. Each time you notice, you have the chance to release, to return to openness. Over time, this practice becomes natural. Relationships shift from contracts of ownership to dances of freedom, where each step is chosen, not forced. To live this way is to honor the truth of connection without denying its impermanence. It is to love deeply, knowing loss will come, and to find beauty in that very fragility. It is to hold someone close without chaining them, to care without control, to give without demand. This is the paradox of non-grasping in relationships. The less you hold, the more love flourishes. In this freedom, relationships stop being cages and become wings. They are no longer about security at all costs, but about growth, connection, and presence. They become places where both people can breathe, where love is not diminished by impermanence, but made more radiant by it. This is where true intimacy lives, in the space created when possession dissolves and the heart is free to love without fear. When love is freed from the chains of grasping, it reveals itself as something alive, tender, and unforced. To care without possession, to give without demand, to walk alongside another without clinging, this opens the heart in ways that fear never could. Yet as soon as the heart learns to release, life presents the next challenge. Even when love flows freely, even when you meet life with openness, you still face delays, detours, and disappointments. These moments test not only your patience, but also your trust in the unfolding of the universe. It is here that patience becomes more than waiting. It becomes a mirror, reflecting back the state of your faith, your surrender, and your willingness to live in rhythm with life rather than against it. Patience is often misunderstood as passivity, as if it means doing nothing while time drags on. But true patience is active. It is the ability to stay steady when things do not move at your pace. It is the art of remaining open when outcomes arrive slower than you want. It is choosing not to collapse into frustration when the path bends away from your expectations. Patience does not freeze you, it refines you. It burns away the illusion that you control the timing of life, and it teaches you to trust that what is delayed is not denied, that detours may carry wisdom you could not see at first. Delays challenge the ego because the ego thrives on speed, on results, on the satisfaction of getting what it wants now. When life slows you down, when progress is halted, the ego panics. It says, "I am wasting time. I am failing. I should be further along." These thoughts reveal not the truth of your situation, but the impatience of the mind. To sit in delay without resentment is to recognize that life's timing is not bound to your demands. It is to surrender the clock of the ego to the rhythm of the cosmos. Detours test your faith in a different way. You thought you knew where you were going, only to find the road blocked or redirected. At first it feels like failure, like being pushed off course. But with patience, you begin to see that detours are not mistakes, they are teachers. They reveal possibilities you would have missed, perspectives you would not have considered, strengths you would not have developed. What feels like being led astray is often the very path you needed to grow. The cosmic mirror of patience shows you that control is not the same as direction. You may not have chosen the detour, but it still carries you forward. Disappointments are the sharpest test. They arrive when what you longed for simply does not happen, when effort yields no fruit, when doors close despite your hope. The ego resists disappointment with anger, with bitterness, with despair. Yet if you look closely, disappointment is also a mirror. It shows you where expectation still grips you, where desire still clings, where trust has not yet ripened. Patience in disappointment is not about pretending it doesn't hurt. It is about allowing the hurt without letting it harden you. It is about trusting that even when life says no, it is not the end of the story. The lesson hidden in patience is surrender. Not the surrender of giving up, but the surrender of releasing control over outcomes and timelines. This surrender deepens trust. You begin to see that delays are not empty. They are spaces where unseen causes are aligning. You begin to see that detours are not accidents. They are redirections. You begin to see that disappointments are not betrayals. They are doorways to unexpected paths. Patience turns what feels like wasted time into fertile ground for trust. This practice reshapes your daily life. In small moments, patience teaches you to release irritation when the line moves slowly, when the train is late, when the plan falls apart. These moments are not obstacles, they are training. They prepare your heart to meet larger delays with steadiness. Each small act of patience strengthens the muscle of surrender, so that when greater tests arrive, you can face them without breaking. Patience also reshapes your relationship with yourself. So often we are impatient with our own growth. We demand to heal faster, to learn quicker, to transform without struggle. But the heart does not bloom on command. Healing unfolds at its own pace. Wisdom ripens over time. To meet yourself with patience is to stop demanding perfection and to start honoring the slow work of growth. This self-patience softens shame and deepens compassion, making you kinder not only to yourself, but to others who struggle too. On a deeper level, patience reveals the illusion of linear progress. Life does not always move in straight lines. Sometimes you circle back, sometimes you pause, sometimes you move sideways before moving forward. The mind interprets this as failure, but patience shows you that progress is not always visible. Seeds grow in silence before they break the soil. Trust grows in the dark before it shines as clarity. Patience teaches you to honor the hidden work of the universe, even when you cannot see it. This cosmic mirror also reflects the quality of your surrender in relationships. Impatience often shows up in the desire for others to change quickly, to meet your needs instantly, to heal on your timeline. But just as your growth takes time, so does theirs. To meet others with patience is to respect their pace, their path, their unfolding. It is to love without forcing, to support without rushing. This patience nurtures deeper connection because it removes the pressure of expectation and replaces it with spaciousness. Patience even transforms how you experience joy. Without it, joy is fleeting, consumed by the urge for more, by the demand for the next high. With patience, joy becomes deeper because you no longer rush past it. You linger in simple pleasures. You allow yourself to savor the present without leaping ahead. The sweetness of life becomes more vivid when you are not racing to the next moment. There is also a spiritual patience that stretches beyond personal timelines. It is the patience to trust that the universe itself has its own rhythm. Just as tides rise and fall, just as seasons shift, just as stars are born and die, your life unfolds in cycles larger than your understanding. Spiritual patience bows to this vastness. It says, I may not see why this delay, this detour, this disappointment has come, but I trust it is part of the greater weaving. This trust turns uncertainty into sacred mystery, and in that mystery, the heart rests. Patience is not weakness. It takes strength to wait without bitterness, to endure without complaint, to keep faith when results do not come. It is easier to grasp, to push, to demand. Patience requires humility and courage. Humility to admit you are not the master of time, and courage to continue without guarantees. But when cultivated, patience becomes one of the deepest powers of the heart. This is the cosmic mirror of patience. Every delay shows you whether you can surrender control. Every detour shows you whether you can trust direction. Every disappointment shows you whether you can release expectation. Life reflects back your inner state through these tests, not to punish you, but to refine you. Patience is not waiting for the storm to end. It is learning to stand in the rain with trust, knowing the storm too has its place in the unfolding. And when this lesson settles deeply, you find that patience is no longer about enduring time, but about entering fully into it. You stop waiting for life to begin after obstacles are removed, and you start living within the unfolding exactly as it is. Each delay, each detour, each disappointment becomes not an interruption, but part of the sacred journey itself. This is the surrender that patience reveals, and this is the peace it brings. When patience begins to deepen, when you learn to see delays, detours, and disappointments not as punishments, but as reflections of your trust, something else comes to the surface. Beneath impatience lies a quieter, heavier attachment, the attachment to time itself. Not just waiting for things, but the belief that life should unfold according to your schedule. The idea that milestones must arrive when you expect them, that success, love, healing, or awakening should come on your preferred timeline. And when they do not, frustration builds and the heart feels betrayed. This is the hidden weight of time. The next lesson is learning how to surrender the timeline, to let go of when, and allow the universe to move in rhythms far beyond what the mind can measure. Timelines are powerful illusions because they feel rational. From childhood, you are told what should happen by certain ages. School, career, relationships, stability, retirement. Society builds invisible clocks that tick loudly in the background, and you begin to measure your life against them. If you are behind the schedule, you feel anxious. If you are ahead, you feel proud. Yet both pride and anxiety rest on the same illusion that life must obey an external calendar. The truth is that life does not move in straight lines or fixed deadlines. It unfolds in spirals, cycles, and unpredictable currents. To demand it align with your schedule is to set yourself against its natural rhythm. The suffering caused by clinging to timelines shows itself everywhere. People grieve not only because something hasn't arrived, but because it hasn't arrived on time. A relationship that has not appeared by a certain age feels like failure. A career that has not advanced fast enough feels like shame. Healing that takes longer than expected feels like weakness. These feelings are not born from reality, but from comparison to an invisible schedule. Without that schedule, what remains is simply the truth. You are still unfolding, and there is no lateness in life. Surrendering the timeline begins with loosening the grip of expectation. The question is no longer, when will this happen? But, what is being asked of me now? This shift transforms how you live. Instead of chasing the future, you engage the present. Instead of measuring progress by the clock, you measure it by depth, by authenticity, by sincerity. Time becomes less of a cage and more of a flow, something you move within rather than something you race against. This practice requires trust because the ego resists uncertainty. It wants clear deadlines and guaranteed arrivals. It fears being left behind, so it pushes harder. But life's great transformations rarely follow deadlines. A seed does not sprout because the clock strikes noon, it sprouts when conditions ripen. In the same way, love appears, growth unfolds, wisdom deepens, not because you demanded it, but because the universe prepared the ground. Trusting this rhythm means acknowledging that some seasons of life are about waiting, others about blossoming, others about letting go. Each season is necessary. This perspective also transforms disappointment. What feels like delay may simply mean the conditions are not yet aligned. You may want something desperately, but unseen causes are still unfolding. A closed door now may prevent harm later. A long wait may allow you to grow in ways that prepare you for what is to come. From the view of the ego, this looks like unfairness. From the view of surrender, it is wisdom. The timeline you created is not the timeline the universe follows. Letting go of when also changes how you carry desire. Desires are not wrong, they are part of being human. But when desires harden into timelines, suffering begins. You start to say, I must have this by then, or else my life has no meaning. This rigidity blinds you to what is actually unfolding. When you release the timeline, desire becomes lighter. You can still hold visions, still work toward goals, but without the desperation that demands a deadline. You act sincerely, but you leave space for life to surprise you. Relationships also shift under this wisdom. So often connections are pressured by time. We should be further along by now. We should have achieved this milestone already. These pressures create tension that suffocates the relationship. But when you release the timeline, you allow the connection to unfold naturally. Some bonds deepen quickly, others take years. Some last for a season, others for a lifetime. None of them are late. None of them are early. They simply are. Surrendering the timeline also frees you from the weight of comparison. Much of the suffering around time comes from looking at others, what they have achieved, what they have gained, how far they appear ahead. But every life is shaped by unique conditions. Comparing timelines is meaningless, like comparing the blooming of a rose and a pine tree. Each unfolds in its own rhythm. When you stop comparing, you honor your path as it is, without measuring it against another's clock. Spiritual practice itself demands this surrender. Many people enter the path with quiet urgency. I should be enlightened by now. I should have transcended this habit already. These thoughts poison practice because they treat awakening as a deadline to meet rather than a process of letting go. The wisdom of surrender says, your task is to walk the path with sincerity, not to dictate how fast the path unfolds. Awakening comes not because you rushed, but because you relaxed into truth. This surrender is not easy. The mind clings to time because it fears wasting life. But the irony is that clinging to time is what wastes life. You spend hours, months, years lamenting what hasn't happened instead of living what is here. When you release the timeline, you stop waiting for life to begin. You begin to live now, in the only moment that has ever truly existed. Trust deepens as you see the evidence of this truth in your own life. Reflect on times when things did not happen when you wanted, but when they finally did, the timing was perfect. Or times when what you thought was a delay protected you from harm, or when an unexpected detour led to blessings you could never have planned. These experiences are not coincidences, they are reminders that life has its own intelligence. To surrender the timeline is to align with that intelligence rather than resist it. This alignment brings peace. You no longer feel haunted by lateness or rushed by urgency. You begin to walk at the pace of life itself, steady and present. You discover that what matters is not when something happens, but how you meet it when it does. Patience and trust weave together, dissolving fear. Surrendering the timeline also awakens gratitude. When you stop demanding life arrive on your schedule, you notice the gifts that are already here. You realize that even in waiting, life is still offering you moments of beauty, of connection, of growth. Waiting is not emptiness, it is fullness in disguise. This surrender is not laziness. It does not mean abandoning effort or drifting aimlessly. It means acting with sincerity, but without the burden of deadlines. It means planting seeds, watering them, and trusting they will bloom when ready. It means living with rhythm instead of resistance. Ultimately, Surrendering the timeline is surrendering the ego's illusion of control. It is admitting that time belongs not to you, but to the universe, that life unfolds in patterns too vast for the mind to grasp. To let go of should and when is to step into the timeless present where peace already exists. And when you truly live this way, a deep calm arises. You stop measuring your life by clocks and calendars and start measuring it by presence, by kindness, by truth. You stop rushing toward imagined futures and start resting in the richness of now. The universe continues to unfold, not on your timeline but on its own, and in trusting this, you discover a freedom the clock can never give. When the grip of time loosens, when you stop demanding that life deliver on your personal schedule, something deeper becomes possible. The frantic urgency to force outcomes fades, and a quieter rhythm begins to emerge. But even as you learn to trust the timing of things, the mind still seeks noise, distraction, and constant activity. It fills silence with chatter, both external and internal, as though quiet itself is a threat. Yet true trust in the universe is not only about releasing control over time, it is also about cultivating the power of silence. Silence is not emptiness. It is a language, a presence, a field where the guidance of life can be heard more clearly than in all the noise of striving. Silence unsettles many people because it removes the familiar crutches of distraction. In silence, there is no story to hide behind, no constant input to drown out fear. What remains is yourself, raw and unfiltered. And for many, this feels uncomfortable. Yet this discomfort is the very reason silence matters. It strips away the layers of resistance and reveals what has always been beneath. When you cultivate silence, you are not withdrawing from life, you are aligning with its most subtle currents. Noise often drowns out wisdom. When the mind is busy filling every gap with thoughts, analysis, and plans, there is no space left for deeper insight to arise. The universe speaks in whispers, not shouts. Guidance arrives as intuition, as a quiet sense of knowing, as the gentle nudge of the heart. These whispers are easily missed if your mind is filled with noise. Silence is the soil where clarity grows, the space where subtle truths become audible. Silence also teaches patience in a way that no external practice can. When you sit in silence, time slows, the need to rush weakens. You learn to be present without constantly seeking stimulation. This practice trains the heart to stay steady in life's pauses, to remain open even when nothing appears to be happening. In this way, silence itself becomes an embodiment of trust. You are willing to sit with what is, without forcing movement, without demanding results. This stillness does not mean passivity. It creates a foundation for wiser action. From silence, decisions arise with more clarity because they are not rushed by fear or driven by noise. You learn to act not from agitation, but from alignment. This is the difference between forcing outcomes and allowing them to unfold. Silence is not the absence of action, it is the ground from which right action emerges. In relationships, silence is equally powerful. We often believe love is shown through constant words, explanations, or reassurances. But sometimes the deepest form of connection is simply presence without speech. To sit with another in silence, without needing to fill the space, is a sign of profound trust. It shows that the bond does not depend on constant performance, but can rest in the stillness of being together. This quiet presence communicates more than words ever could. Silence also deepens self-awareness. When you allow the mind to quiet, suppressed thoughts and emotions rise to the surface. At first, this can feel overwhelming, as though silence has made things louder. But in truth, silence is only revealing what was always there. Meeting these thoughts with openness allows healing. Instead of running from discomfort, you sit with it, listen to it, and eventually release it. This process is how silence becomes a teacher of courage. Culturally, we are conditioned to equate noise with productivity, silence with laziness. Yet some of the greatest breakthroughs, both personal and collective, arise not from frantic effort, but from stillness. Philosophers, scientists, artists, and mystics across history have all testified to the role of silence in their insights. Moments of quiet reflection opened doors that striving could not. Trusting silence means acknowledging that wisdom does not always come from doing more, but from doing less. In spiritual practice, silence is often cultivated through meditation, retreat, or mindful pauses. But silence is not limited to formal settings. It can be found in a mindful walk, in the pause before responding to anger, in the breath taken before making a decision. Silence can be practiced in the midst of daily life, not as withdrawal but as a deeper listening. The key is not the absence of sound, but the presence of awareness. Silence also dissolves the ego's constant need for validation. In noise, the ego thrives, it compares, defends, asserts itself. In silence, the ego has nothing to grasp. It resists at first, creating restless thoughts, but eventually it softens. What remains is awareness without identity, presence without performance. This is why silence is so central to awakening. It reveals the self beyond the self-image, the awareness that does not need words to exist. The power of silence extends into how we experience the world. In noise, we skim the surface. In silence, we notice depth. The sound of a bird, the rustle of leaves, the rhythm of breath all become vivid. Silence sharpens perception because it clears the clutter of mental chatter. This clarity reconnects us to the subtle beauty of life, the details we overlook when lost in noise. Silence also heals relationships with time. In stillness, you stop racing from past to future and rest in the present. You realize that life does not need constant commentary to be meaningful. The moment itself is enough. This quiet presence dissolves anxiety and creates space for peace. Trust grows because you are no longer demanding constant confirmation. You are willing to rest in the unfolding as it is. There is also a sacred dimension to silence. Many traditions speak of silence as the language of the divine, the space where truth is revealed beyond words. Words can only point, but silence allows direct experience. It is in silence that mystics encountered the vastness of being, that seekers touched what lies beyond form. To cultivate silence is to prepare the heart for this direct encounter with the mystery that words cannot contain. Practicing silence does not mean avoiding sound. It means no longer being enslaved by the need to fill every space. It means recognizing that quiet is not emptiness, but presence. It means trusting that in stillness, life continues to move, wisdom continues to ripen, the universe continues to guide. Silence is not a void, but a vessel, carrying subtle truths that can only be heard when the noise fades. This practice requires courage in a noisy world. Others may misunderstand your need for silence, interpreting it as distance or withdrawal. But silence is not withdrawal from life. It is deeper participation. It is the willingness to step out of distraction and meet existence directly. It is the strength to listen not only to others, but to the quiet guidance within. In cultivating silence, you discover a different kind of strength. Not the strength of force, but the strength of stillness. Not the power of control, but the power of alignment. Silence teaches you that you do not need to push for answers or chase outcomes. You need only to listen, to wait, to trust that what is meant to unfold will unfold when the time is right. And in this trust, silence becomes a friend. No longer feared, no longer filled with anxiety, it becomes a refuge. A place where you return to yourself, where you reconnect with the universe. where you remember that life is not found in noise but in presence. This is the power of silence in trust, the doorway to alignment, the space where fear dissolves, the ground where peace takes root. When silence begins to take root, you discover a strength that does not rely on noise, on proof, or on constant reassurance. In that quiet space, the universe speaks in ways the restless mind could never hear. But silence also makes something else clear. It reveals how much of our suffering comes from the stories we keep repeating, the demands we place upon life. One of the heaviest of these demands is the insistence that life be fair, that justice always arrive in ways we can see and measure. As long as we cling to the idea that everything must be just, we are chained to disappointment. The next step in letting go is learning how freedom arises when you release the grip of justice and meet life as it truly is. The desire for justice is deeply human. From childhood, we are taught to say, "That's not fair," when we feel deprived or mistreated. Fairness becomes a lens through which we judge not only the world but ourselves. If we work hard, we believe we deserve reward. If we love fully, we believe we deserve love in return. If we are kind, we believe kindness should return to us. Yet life does not obey these equations. Good people suffer, careless people prosper, kindness is overlooked, cruelty is rewarded. To demand that the universe follow human notions of fairness is to invite endless resentment. What makes this demand so painful is that it seems noble. Who doesn't want a just world? Yet the craving for fairness hides a subtle form of clinging. It says, "Life must look the way I believe it should." This is another mask of control. When events do not match this expectation, the mind reacts with anger, bitterness, and despair. But anger does not bring justice, bitterness does not heal wounds, and despair does not change reality. They only deepen suffering. Letting go of the idea of justice does not mean becoming indifferent to harm. It does not mean ignoring injustice or abandoning compassion. It means releasing the demand that life itself must always balance out according to our sense of right and wrong. The universe is not built on human morality, it is built on causes and conditions. Things happen because countless factors align, not because they are deserved. To accept this is not to surrender morality, but to stop confusing the law of karma with the human craving for fairness. This shift opens the door to freedom. When you release the need for fairness, you stop fighting reality. You stop replaying questions like, "Why me? Why them? Why now?" You accept that pain and joy, gain and loss, arise through interdependence, not through fairness. This acceptance does not make suffering vanish, but it removes the extra layer of torment that comes from demanding answers where none exist. You can meet life with clarity instead of resentment. This understanding also transforms how you act. When you are no longer driven by the demand for fairness, you act from compassion, not from the hunger for balance. You help others, not because you expect life to reward you, but because kindness itself is enough. You resist harm, not because the universe guarantees success, but because integrity calls you to it. Your actions become free of the transaction of, "I do this, so I will get that." They become expressions of truth, independent of outcome. In relationships, this wisdom is especially powerful. Much conflict arises from the sense that one person has given more than the other, that fairness has not been met. But relationships are not ledgers. When love is reduced to calculations of fairness, resentment builds. Non-demanding love gives because giving is its nature, not because it expects an equal return. Letting go of fairness in love does not mean tolerating abuse. It means dissolving the poison of scorekeeping, which corrodes intimacy. On a larger scale, this perspective reshapes how you meet the world's suffering. Injustice is real, but clinging to outrage alone paralyzes the heart. To see clearly, you must accept that the world has never been perfectly just. You then act to reduce harm, not with bitterness, but with compassion. This is not resignation, it is resilience. It is the strength to keep working for a kinder world without being crushed when perfection does not arrive. Letting go of fairness also softens self-judgment. How often do we turn fairness inward, scolding ourselves with, "I should be better by now. I should not have to struggle like this." These thoughts are disguised demands for inner justice. But growth does not follow such rigid equations. Healing unfolds unevenly, wisdom ripens in unexpected ways. To demand inner fairness is to miss the beauty of your own unfolding. Letting go allows you to meet yourself with patience and kindness. The illusion of fairness is also tied to comparison. We look at others and wonder why their path seems easier, why they received opportunities denied to us. But comparison is another form of the fairness demand. If they have it, I should too. Yet every life is shaped by causes and conditions too complex to measure. What looks like luck in one moment may reveal hidden struggles in another. When you let go of fairness, you stop comparing timelines and start honoring your own. Philosophers and spiritual teachers across traditions have pointed to this truth. The Stoics reminded us that the universe is not designed for our preferences. Taoist wisdom speaks of flowing with the way rather than demanding outcomes. Buddhist teachings warn that clinging to should is the root of dukkha. All point to the same liberation. Peace comes not from forcing fairness, but from aligning with what is. This letting go also reshapes how you grieve. When loss strikes, one of the most painful thoughts is, "It's not fair," and truly, it is not. But when you can release this demand, grief becomes purer. You mourn the loss without adding the extra wound of injustice. You can love what was shared without resenting the universe for taking it. This does not erase pain, but it transforms bitterness into tenderness. To let go of justice is not to abandon truth. It is to live more deeply in truth. It is to see that life moves through mystery, that outcomes do not always match effort, that suffering is not a punishment and joy is not always a reward. In this clarity, you find freedom. You stop waiting for life to match your ledger of fairness. You begin to act with sincerity, love with openness, and meet reality as it unfolds. This freedom is radical because it removes one of the ego's last strongholds. The ego wants guarantees that effort will equal reward, that good deeds will equal blessings, that fairness will always be served. But the universe does not operate on human contracts. To surrender this illusion is to step into a life that is unpredictable, yet profound, unfair, yet beautiful, fleeting, yet complete. And when this surrender deepens, you find that freedom is not in fairness, but in presence. Not in demanding balance, but in living with compassion, regardless of outcome. Not in clinging to what should be, but in embracing what is. This is the release hidden in letting go of justice. A life no longer trapped in resentment, but open to the mystery of existence in all its imperfection. When you release the need for fairness, a great burden lifts. Life no longer has to match your inner scales for you to find peace. You stop demanding balance where none can exist and begin to act from compassion rather than expectation. Yet even with this freedom, another truth emerges. Sometimes life does not just feel unfair, it feels unbearable. There are moments when things fall apart, when the structures you trusted collapse, when the story you thought you were living ends abruptly. These moments of breakdown, failure, and loss can shake you to the core. But here lies one of the deepest lessons of the path. Falling apart is not a mistake. It is a doorway, a dharma, a sacred invitation into a trust more profound than anything comfort or success can teach. Breakdowns frighten us because they expose fragility. We are conditioned to celebrate strength, achievement, stability. When these vanish, we feel ashamed, as though collapse means we are broken beyond repair. But falling apart is part of the rhythm of existence. Just as forests burn and regenerate, just as stars explode and create the elements for new worlds, so too must parts of your life crumble, so something truer can take form. Breakdown is not failure, it is transformation disguised as loss. Failures hold the same teaching. Society glorifies success, but success often reinforces ego, convincing us that control and planning are the keys to life. Failure shatters that illusion. It strips away pride, it humbles the heart, it reveals that effort does not always lead to the outcomes we desire. Yet within that shattering is clarity. You see more clearly what truly matters. You discover resilience you did not know you had. You grow in compassion for others who stumble. Failure becomes a mirror, reflecting not your worth, but the impermanence of outcomes. Endings are perhaps the hardest. Relationships end, careers end, chapters of life close. Endings carry grief because they mark the death of what was familiar, but they also carry freedom. Every ending clears space for a beginning that could not exist otherwise. To cling to what has ended is to suffocate yourself with ghosts. To let it go is to honor its role in your journey and open to the unknown ahead. Endings are not punishments, they are thresholds. The Dharma of falling apart is about learning to see collapse as sacred. It means trusting that breakdowns are not the destruction of meaning, but the clearing of illusions. It means surrendering the demand that life always be stable, and instead bowing to the truth that growth often requires disruption. The seed must split open for the plant to grow. The old skin must shed for the new to form. Without falling apart, there is no transformation. This teaching becomes practical in the darkest moments. When you feel overwhelmed, when everything you relied on dissolves, the instinct is to resist. The mind says, "This should not be happening." But the Dharma of falling apart says, "This is happening, and within it is the doorway." To trust this is to shift from resistance to openness. You stop wasting energy on denial and begin to see what the collapse is teaching. One lesson is humility. Breakdown reveals that you are not invincible, that certainty and control are illusions. This humbling is painful but necessary because humility opens the heart. It connects you to others who suffer, dissolves arrogance, and makes compassion more natural. In falling apart, you remember that every being is fragile, every life is vulnerable, every path includes suffering. Another lesson is impermanence. Collapse makes visible what is always true, that nothing lasts, nothing is fixed. Structures you thought were solid dissolve overnight. Roles you thought defined you are taken away. In this raw truth, the heart learns not to cling. You begin to appreciate life not because it is stable, but because it is fleeting. The very fragility of existence becomes the source of its beauty. Falling apart also teaches resilience. At first, it feels like the end, but in time, you notice you are still here. The heart still beats, the breath still flows, the earth still holds you. Slowly, you rebuild not the same as before, but perhaps truer. Each time you collapse and rise again, trust deepens. You realize you can survive what you thought would destroy you. This resilience is not born from avoidance, but from passing through the fire and emerging with wisdom. There is also a stripping away in breakdowns. Much of what falls apart is what no longer serves you. False identities, unhealthy attachments, outdated dreams. Collapse clears these illusions, though often against your will. In the rubble, you find yourself closer to truth. What remains is simpler, more authentic. You may lose status, possessions, or certainty, but you gain clarity. This stripping away is the silent gift of falling apart. Failures and endings also open the heart to compassion. When you succeed, it is easy to forget the suffering of others. But when you fail, when you lose, when you grieve, you see yourself reflected in the struggles of those around you. The wall of separation softens. Compassion grows because you know what it is to ache, to stumble, to feel lost. Falling apart binds you to the shared humanity of suffering and awakens a tenderness that cannot be learned through comfort. The Dharma of falling apart also reveals the futility of perfection. The ego dreams of a flawless life, always strong, always successful, always composed. But perfection is an illusion, and clinging to it only creates suffering. When you fall apart, you see that imperfection is not failure, but reality. The cracks are not shameful, they are where the light enters. To embrace falling apart is to free yourself from the prison of perfectionism and rest in the truth of being human. Trust deepens when you stop seeing collapse as an enemy. You realize that breakdown is part of the same universe that brings growth. You learn to bow even to endings, knowing they are not mistakes but stages of the path. This trust does not erase pain, it transforms it. Pain becomes teacher, grief becomes guide, endings become gateways. Falling apart becomes not the opposite of the path, but the path itself. Living this wisdom requires courage. It means allowing yourself to break without shame, to fail without despair, to let go without resentment. It means meeting collapse not with bitterness but with curiosity. What is being revealed here? What illusions are being burned away? What new life is trying to emerge? This courage is not loud. It is quiet, steady, born of trust in something larger than the self. The freedom hidden in falling apart is profound. When you see that collapse is not the end but a doorway, fear loses its grip. You no longer live in constant anxiety about avoiding failure or preventing endings. You know they will come, and you trust that when they do, they will carry hidden gifts. This trust makes life lighter, freer. You stop clinging to stability and start embracing the sacred rhythm of rise and fall, creation and destruction, beginning and ending. And when you live this way, you no longer fear falling apart. You recognize it as part of being alive, as part of awakening. You do not seek it, but when it comes, you meet it as teacher. In this trust, even the hardest moments become infused with meaning. You discover that the ground does not vanish when you collapse, it only shifts, preparing you for a new way of standing. This is the Dharma of falling apart. To see breakdown not as failure, but as transformation. To see endings not as betrayal, but as thresholds. To see collapse not as the end of the path, but as the sacred doorway that opens deeper trust. When you learn that even falling apart carries hidden wisdom, that collapse itself is part of the sacred unfolding, fear begins to loosen its hold. Endings are no longer treated as enemies, but as doorways into deeper trust. Yet even as you accept the inevitability of breakdowns, there remains another subtle grip of the mind, the chase after pleasure and the resistance to pain. These two forces pull at us constantly, shaping our choices, coloring our emotions, and driving us in circles. To live freely, the next step is to see both pleasure and pain as transient, to stop being enslaved by either, and to rest in the flow of life as it truly is. The craving for pleasure is woven into human experience. From the sweetness of food to the thrill of success, the warmth of love to the beauty of praise, pleasure lights up the senses and the mind clings to it. The moment joy arises, the heart wants it to last forever. But pleasure is by its nature impermanent. The food is finished, the applause fades, the relationship changes, the high recedes. When we cling to pleasure as though it can stay, suffering is born. The pursuit of permanent highs is endless, and the hunger never ends. Pain, on the other hand, is the shadow we try desperately to avoid. Discomfort in the body, rejection from others, failure, illness, aging, grief, all are part of existence. Yet we fight them as though resistance could make them disappear. But pain too is impermanent. No feeling lasts forever. Yet when we resist it, we give it more strength. We layer fear on top of pain, resentment on top of discomfort, and the suffering multiplies. The cycle of chasing pleasure and fleeing pain keeps the mind restless. It never allows us to be still. The Buddha called this the wheel of craving, the endless turning of desire and aversion. To step off the wheel is to practice non-attachment, to meet pleasure without clinging, to meet pain without resistance, and to see both as passing weather rather than as the ground of your identity. Non-attachment does not mean indifference. It does not mean you cannot enjoy a beautiful moment or feel sorrow in loss. It means you no longer tie your happiness to the demand that pleasure stay or pain vanish. You savor joy without grasping it, and you allow sorrow without drowning in it. You trust that both are transient waves on the ocean of life, and that your being is deeper than either wave. This practice begins with awareness. Notice how the mind reacts when pleasure arises. There is joy, but quickly comes the thought, I hope this doesn't end. How can I keep it? How can I get more? In this moment, suffering enters. Non-attachment allows you to enjoy the sweetness fully without trying to capture it. You know it will pass, and that very knowledge makes it more precious. The same awareness applies to pain. When discomfort arises, the mind cries out, this should not be here, I cannot bear this. The resistance adds another layer of suffering to the pain itself. Non-attachment allows you to sit with the sensation or the sorrow as it is, without the story that it should not exist. You discover that pain, while difficult, is survivable, and that it too changes with time. This freedom reshapes how you live. No longer chasing every high, you stop exhausting yourself in pursuit of endless stimulation. No longer fleeing every low, you stop wasting energy in resistance. Life becomes steadier, calmer, more balanced. Joy is deeper because it is savored without fear, and pain is lighter because it is carried without extra struggle. Relationships change too under this wisdom. Many conflicts arise from clinging to the pleasure others bring or resisting the pain they cause. When you expect someone to keep you constantly happy, the bond becomes fragile. When you reject them the moment they disappoint you, the bond becomes shallow. Non-attachment allows you to love people as they are, not for the pleasure they provide or the pain they avoid. This creates more authentic connection because love is no longer chained to conditions. Work and ambition also transform. Many chase careers, wealth, or recognition, believing the pleasure of achievement will sustain them forever. But the thrill fades, and the hunger grows. Non-attachment does not mean abandoning effort. It means working sincerely without enslaving yourself to the highs of success or the lows of failure. You act from integrity, not from the craving for constant pleasure or the fear of pain. Even the body becomes a teacher here. The body experiences both comfort and discomfort, pleasure and pain. To attach to one and reject the other is to create endless struggle. But to see the body's sensations as impermanent is to find freedom within them. A pleasant feeling is enjoyed as long as it lasts. A painful one is endured with patience, both passing like clouds across the sky. The practice of non-attachment to pleasure and pain cultivates equanimity. Equanimity is the evenness of heart that remains steady regardless of external conditions. It is not coldness, it is warmth that does not waver. It allows you to be present with all experiences without being tossed back and forth by them. This is the foundation of true freedom, not a life without pain, not a life filled only with pleasure, but a life rooted in trust that you can meet both without losing yourself. This wisdom also deepens compassion. When you see how all beings are caught in the same cycle, chasing pleasure, fleeing pain, you soften toward them. You recognize that their mistakes, their greed, their anger, come from the same restlessness that once lived in you. Compassion grows because you see their suffering not as malice, but as ignorance. The same ignorance you are learning to release. The great gift of non-attachment is that it allows you to live more fully in the present. When you are not grasping at joy or resisting sorrow, you are simply here. You taste the sweetness of a moment without fear of its end. You feel the weight of grief without denying it. You stop running, stop chasing, stop clinging. Life is no longer about controlling waves, but about resting in the ocean itself. This trust reshapes how you view the future. Without non-attachment, the future is haunted by fear. What if I lose pleasure? What if pain comes? With non-attachment, the future is simply unknown, filled with both joy and sorrow, both of which you can meet. Trust grows because you no longer need to control what cannot be controlled. Non-attachment to pleasure and pain is not detachment from life. It is deeper engagement. It allows you to participate in every moment without chains, without demands, without fear. You laugh when joy comes, you cry when sorrow comes, and you know both are passing. In that knowing, you discover a peace that neither pleasure nor pain can give. And this is the heart of the teaching, to trust the flow of life, not by chasing highs or resisting lows, but by resting in the truth that all things are transient. Pleasure and pain are waves, rising and falling. The ocean beneath them is vast, steady, and free. When you stop grasping at the waves, you begin to live in the depth of the ocean itself. When you stop clinging to pleasure and stop fleeing from pain, a deep balance begins to emerge. Life no longer feels like a battlefield of highs and lows, but a flowing river where both sweetness and sorrow drift by. Yet even with this steadiness, the mind still carries one final craving, the hunger for certainty, the urge to know what will happen, to have answers ready, to feel secure in the map of the future. This craving is subtle but powerful, and it keeps us restless even when everything else is released. The next step on the path is learning to see uncertainty itself as a gift, to discover that not knowing is not a weakness, but the very soil where faith, wonder, and trust can grow. Uncertainty unsettles us because it threatens the illusion of control. The mind wants life to be predictable, to follow a clear script, to provide answers that never change. When outcomes are unclear, anxiety rushes in. We invent scenarios, cling to explanations, grasp for any solid ground. Yet no matter how much we calculate, life resists being pinned down. Plans dissolve, conditions shift, people change. To demand certainty in a world built on impermanence is to fight a battle you cannot win. But what if uncertainty is not the enemy? What if it is the very doorway to freedom? Not knowing is uncomfortable, but it is also alive. Certainty closes possibilities. Uncertainty keeps them open. When you admit you do not know, the rigid walls of assumption break apart, and curiosity enters. Life becomes less about defending answers and more about exploring questions. This shift is not about embracing ignorance, but about cultivating humility. To say, "I don't know," is to recognize the vastness of reality and the limits of the mind. It is to bow to the mystery instead of pretending to master it. This humility does not weaken you, it strengthens you, because it allows you to live in alignment with truth rather than illusion. Not knowing also deepens trust. When you let go of the demand for answers, you begin to rely not on certainty but on faith in the unfolding of life. You learn to take the next step without needing to see the entire path. You discover that clarity often comes after movement, not before it. Like walking in fog, each step reveals only what is directly before you. To continue anyway is trust in its purest form. The gift of uncertainty also appears in creativity. Every act of creation begins with not knowing, with the blank page, the empty canvas, the silent instrument. If everything was certain, nothing new could emerge. Uncertainty is the space where possibility lives. It is the fertile soil where innovation and growth are born. To embrace not knowing is to open yourself to discovery, to let life surprise you with what it can reveal. In relationships, not knowing brings freshness. So often we believe we already know the people closest to us, and in that certainty, we stop listening, stop seeing. But to admit you don't fully know another human being is to stay curious, to meet them anew each day. This openness allows connection to deepen, because love is nourished not by assumption, but by presence. Not knowing also transforms how you meet suffering. When pain arises, the mind demands answers. Why is this happening? When will it end? What does it mean? These questions often have no clear response, and the insistence on certainty only adds torment. To accept not knowing is to allow pain to be what it is, without forcing explanation. This acceptance opens space for compassion, because you realize others too are carrying unanswered questions. The fear of uncertainty is often tied to the future. We want to know what will happen so we can feel safe. But safety built on certainty is fragile, because certainty does not exist. Real safety comes from learning to live without guarantees, to find peace not in answers but in presence. The future will always be unknown, but you can meet it with openness rather than fear. This way of living requires courage. It is easier to cling to false answers than to rest in mystery, but each time you release the demand for certainty, the heart expands. You begin to see that uncertainty is not chaos, it is freedom. It means you are not trapped in one fixed outcome, but open to countless possibilities. It means you do not have to define life too narrowly, but can allow it to unfold in ways beyond your imagination. The wisdom of not knowing is echoed in many traditions. Zen teachers speak of beginner's mind, the openness that comes when you drop the illusion of knowledge. Mystics describe the divine as mystery, beyond human comprehension. Philosophers remind us that the only true wisdom is knowing how little we know. These teachings point to the same truth. Certainty is illusion, and freedom lies in releasing it. Practically, this can be cultivated in daily life. When uncertainty arises, instead of grasping for immediate answers, pause. Allow the space of not knowing. Notice the discomfort, but do not rush to fill it. Let the question remain open. In time, clarity may come, or it may not. Either way, you discover that life continues, that peace is possible even without answers. Not knowing also nurtures patience. When you stop demanding immediate clarity, you allow life to reveal itself in its own time. You stop forcing conclusions and start trusting the slow ripening of truth. Patience is not waiting for certainty, it is resting in uncertainty without resistance. This way of living does not remove difficulty, but it transforms how you carry it. You no longer waste energy fighting the mystery of life. You begin to walk with it, to hold it tenderly, to let it teach you. In this tenderness, you find a freedom deeper than certainty ever offered. The gift of not knowing is that it returns you to wonder. When you admit you do not have all the answers, the world becomes alive again. Each day holds surprises, each moment carries mystery. You stop seeing life as a puzzle to solve and start seeing it as a dance to join. You stop needing to conquer the unknown and start trusting it as part of the sacred unfolding. And in this trust, you discover that not knowing is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is the infinite field of possibility, the place where faith grows, the space where the heart learns to rest in mystery. The mind may crave certainty, but the soul thrives in openness. To embrace not knowing is to embrace life itself, raw and unfiltered, vast and alive. When you begin to rest in the mystery of not knowing, the heart softens in a way that answers never could. Certainty closes doors, but uncertainty keeps life open, fluid, alive. And as you walk more comfortably within this openness, something beautiful begins to shift inside you. You no longer hold on so tightly to what you have. The fear that once demanded security through possession and control loosens its grip. Out of this loosening, a natural impulse arises: to give, to share without measuring, to release without demand, to pour out what you can into the world without waiting for a return. This is the art of non-clinging generosity, where giving itself becomes freedom and trust in life deepens with every open hand. At the root of clinging is fear, the belief that there is not enough, that you must hold tightly or you will lose everything. This scarcity mindset is woven into culture, reinforced by systems that tell you to accumulate more, save more, protect more. Yet accumulation rarely brings peace. The more you cling, the heavier the burden becomes. Non-clinging generosity offers the opposite truth. Life feels lighter when you release, not when you hoard. True generosity is not measured by the size of what you give, but by the freedom with which you give it. To give while secretly expecting recognition, loyalty, or repayment is not generosity. It is a transaction disguised as kindness. The art of non-clinging generosity lies in offering without strings, in releasing something into the flow of life, and trusting it will ripple outward in ways you may never see. The moment you demand a specific outcome, you have slipped back into clinging. This practice reshapes how you view possessions. Objects you once held with tight fists become tools to share. A meal prepared for someone, clothes passed on, time offered to listen, all become acts of generosity when done without expectation. The act itself nourishes you because it frees you from the grip of ownership. Instead of being possessed by your possessions, you allow them to move, to serve, to uplift. Non-clinging generosity also applies to relationships. Too often, love is offered with hidden demands. I give you care, so you will give me affection. I give you support, so you will stay. This is not love in its purest form. It is bargaining. But when you love freely, without needing control or repayment, the bond deepens. The other feels safe because they are not being used as a source of validation. Love given this way does not weaken you. It strengthens the connection by rooting it in freedom. Time, attention, and presence are some of the most powerful gifts you can offer. In a world filled with distraction, to give someone your undivided presence without waiting for reward is rare and precious. This kind of generosity is non-clinging because it does not grasp for outcome, it simply offers itself fully to the moment. The act of being truly present is itself a form of trust in abundance. Trust that giving attention does not diminish you, but expands you. This practice also extends to forgiveness. To forgive is to release the debt you believe someone owes you. Clinging demands repayment. They hurt me, they must make it right. Non-clinging generosity says, I release you, not because you earned it, but because I will not chain myself to this pain. Forgiveness becomes generosity of the heart, a gift that frees both giver and receiver. Non-clinging generosity builds trust in life because it aligns you with abundance rather than scarcity. When you give freely, you affirm the truth that there is always enough, that generosity itself multiplies. You discover that the act of giving creates joy, not depletion. The more you release, the more you feel held by the flow of existence. This is not magical thinking, but a recognition of interdependence. What you give ripples outward, shaping lives you may never see, and often returns to you in unexpected forms. This shift requires courage, because the ego resists letting go. It whispers, if you give too much, you will be left with nothing. But generosity proves the opposite. Giving opens space for new life to flow in. Hoarding closes that space. The paradox is that what you cling to makes you poor, and what you release makes you rich. Non-clinging generosity also frees you from pride. When giving is tied to ego, it becomes a performance. Look at how generous I am. This form of giving still clings to recognition. But when you give quietly, without needing credit, the ego has no foothold. The act becomes pure. The joy comes not from being seen, but from the simple release itself. This wisdom transforms even small acts. A smile offered without demand, a kind word spoken without expectation, a gesture of support without conditions, all are acts of non-clinging generosity. They may seem small, but they ripple outward in profound ways. You may never know how deeply they touch someone, and that unknowing is part of the gift. On a spiritual level, generosity dissolves the illusion of separateness. When you give freely, you affirm that what is yours is not separate from the whole. You recognize that resources, love, time, and wisdom are not personal possessions, but flows of energy moving through you. By releasing them, you participate in the larger cycle of giving and receiving that sustains life itself. Generosity without clinging also reshapes your relationship with death. Death is the final letting go, the moment when all possessions, roles, and identities are released. To practice generosity throughout life is to prepare for this ultimate surrender. Each act of giving trains the heart to let go more lightly, to trust that nothing was ever truly yours to begin with. Death then becomes not a theft, but a continuation of the same rhythm of release you have been practicing all along. This practice also dissolves comparison. When you cling, you measure your worth against others by how much you have. When you give freely, comparison loses its meaning. Abundance is no longer defined by accumulation, but by openness. You see wealth not in what you own, but in how freely you share. Generosity without clinging can even apply to knowledge and wisdom. To hoard insight for recognition is to cling. To share what you know, to teach, to guide, without needing control or praise, is generosity of the mind. It honors the truth that wisdom is not meant to be possessed, but passed on. Ultimately, non-clinging generosity is a practice of trust. Trust that you do not need to hold everything tightly. Trust that the universe provides in ways beyond your control. Trust that letting go opens space for deeper joy. Trust that abundance is not measured by what you keep, but by how freely you release. When this trust matures, giving no longer feels like loss. It feels like alignment with the very flow of life. You realize you were never diminished by generosity, you were expanded by it. The open hand receives more than the closed fist ever could. The art of non-clinging generosity is not about sacrifice, but about freedom. The freedom to live without chains, to love without conditions, to trust without fear. You have walked through the deepest truths of letting go, seeing that nothing can truly be owned, that control is an illusion, that death is a teacher, that silence carries wisdom, that even falling apart is part of the path. You have seen how clinging to possessions, people, self-image, timelines, justice, or even spiritual progress only tightens the chains of suffering. And you have also seen how releasing those chains opens doors to compassion, trust, patience, freedom, and love that is not bound by fear. The universe was never asking you to hold everything together. It was inviting you to surrender into its flow, to trust the unfolding of causes and conditions beyond your sight. Each lesson you've heard tonight is a reminder that life is not a puzzle to solve, but a mystery to embrace. Letting go is not weakness, it is radical strength. And trusting the universe is not blind faith, it is remembering that you are carried always by something far greater than yourself. So as you drift into sleep, allow these teachings to settle into your heart. Let them soften your grip, quiet your mind, and open your spirit to a peace that no possession or answer could ever bring. Tomorrow, carry with you the courage to release one thing you've been holding too tightly, and trust that in that release, space is made for something far more beautiful. Before you close your eyes tonight, I would love to know, which lesson spoke to you the most? Leave a comment with the one teaching you'll carry forward, and let's grow together in this journey of letting go. And if these words brought you clarity, peace, or comfort, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Every week we dive deeper into wisdom that nourishes the mind, strengthens the heart, and frees the spirit. Hit the bell so you never miss the next step on this path of trust and freedom.